Welcome to another episode of the All Pop No Culture podcast. I'm your host this week, Kevin. This week we have a completely different episode than what we usually do. Andrew has a friend from his time in Chicago named Chad who comes on. And Chad is a bona fide pop culture expert, comic nerd, a big fan of the MCU, so we've got a lot to talk about there. There's been a lot of cool stuff talked about in this episode. You know, we start off talking about Chad's current undertaking over on Instagram, where he specializes in taking pictures of action figures and shooting them in a very cinematic way and posting them on Instagram. We'll have his username up in the episode and down in the comments there for you to check out and go follow. Some really cool stuff there. We'll talk a lot about the MCU, dig really deep into Phase 4 of the MCU, talk about The Last of Us. But at the end of the show, something that's really different and really cool. Chad has a deep history in Chicago hip-hop, known as DJ Risky Business. A lot of history there, too. He's working on some really cool stuff there. There's a documentary he's shooting called Midway, the story of Chicago hip-hop. We'll put the website down in the comments for that also, so you can check that out. But it's a really cool episode. Very different, very cool. Chad is super awesome. I can't wait to have him on again. So, as always, thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share with all your friends. I think this one's going to be an awesome one to share. A very different, like I said, kind of episode, but really cool. So enjoy the show. I mean, I think we could just jump into it because I don't know. I have a feeling that we're just going to roll with a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
But Chad is new to the show, never been on. So it's awesome to have a special guest. I feel like you're maybe the coolest person we've ever had on.
Oh,
that includes ourselves.
It's not. Okay, let's bump the brakes, God. No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
So, I know from talking to Andrew, and I followed your page a little bit on Instagram since Andrew introduced me to your stuff. So I know one of the things that you do is I don't know if there's a technical term for it, but you do toy photography, right? Like you.
Yeah, I mean, shooting toys, living my life as close to 12 years old as I can every day.
that's the dream, man. I've got toys lying around up here somewhere, but my office is a little, as far as shelf space and stuff goes, I don't have as much room as I'd like to have. But do you have like a genre that is like your favorite when it comes to, I mean, is it superhero toys mostly, or are you doing?
Yeah, no, it's everything. Like, I have Marvel is my favorite, and Star Wars is pretty much close to that too. I have tons of Star Wars. My main focus now is mostly 6-inch because of the posability and the likeness, and the sculpts that you can get out of it. But I have Ghostbusters. I have it's everything kind of, and not necessarily just nostalgia either, because I do buy new stuff as well. That's dope. But I have Beavis and Butthead figures. I have Mario. I have Voltron. I have tons of Transformers. G.I. Joe. I super love G.I. Joe. I mean, I made these little
that's awesome.
They're little props, and I just have one sitting here. And it's funny, I do like one side Cobra, and then I'll do another side like blank, so it can be, whatever. I have like AIM and Hydra stuff, and I'll make these props.
That's really cool. It's like kind of makes me think of like model building and stuff, where you got to get involved and really dig stuff up.
Yep, I just made a bunch of trees the other night just so I could have like a big, like 1.5 2 foot trees, so I could have like this forest scene that I wanted to do, and was able to, and they came out great. And now we'll shoot it, and it'll be up before this goes up. When does this go up? This
Wednesday. It'll come out on Wednesday. Yeah,
Wednesday. Hopefully Rio will get it. So my fiance does toy photography too.
Oh, that's cool.
We're doing this cool shoot of Cocaine Bear. That's gonna be great.
All right.
That was her idea. I was jealous. I was like, because we got an Ursa Major action figure, which is just a giant grizzly bear. And I'm like, that's fucking brilliant. Oh, can I swear, guys?
Absolutely.
Okay, only because I'm born and raised on the south side of Chicago, and that's my first language is profanity.
Okay.
Yeah,
English is
it's
my
not
second
uncommon
language.
here.
Yeah,
Mhm.
English is my second language. Profanity is my, first language.
And for anybody that wants to know what we're talking about, at least I don't know if you have more, but on Instagram it's Excelsior 1975, right?
Mm-hmm. And my fiance goes by Obey Toys.
OBE?
Uh, what is it? OBEY?
It
OBEY.
sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah, like Obey. Yeah,
Like from that them is what's that movie called? They Live. Is They
they
Live?
live. Yeah, we have our like dining room is kind of like her room. Although I do a lot of the shooting of toys in there. It's her kind of room she designed. This is a little bit more neutral. This living room we have. Although if you can see me, you've got records which are all Chicago artists on the wall, and then of course you've got Sam, and you have a Dora Milaje and a Storm because we pray at the altar of Storm, and there's a Goro action figure from Mortal Kombat there. So anyway, the Victorian room's really dope. She designed it, and it's like she has this uh cabinet that's all like curiosities and skulls and like uh old school like medical equipment from the turn of the century, and that's in this like cabinet she has. Then she has another cabinet that's all dedicated to Audrey 2
Okay.
things that she has, and then next to that is another cabinet dedicated to all things They Live.
Okay.
Okay.
We have a They Live painting in that room, and we have a creature from the Black Lagoon coming out of the wall. It's a fun room.
That's awesome.
And people come over for Halloween parties every year, and they're like, "Oh, it's decorated so awesome. Is this like what is it?" And we're like, "This is every day."
The Audrey 2 stuff, does one of you have like a theater background, or is it just a love of the show, or
Just love of everything, man. She was a fashion designer years ago, and that was her kind of like major in school. And she went to the art institute in Chicago. It was fashion. I mean, we're getting married in May. She's making her own wedding dress.
that's cool.
Yeah,
That's really cool.
yeah. She's amazing, and she's very artistic, and I think that's obviously why we're together, because she encourages me to be as childish as I can be.
That's good. It sounds like too, like attracts like in this case, right? Like you guys are vibing with each other on some of the stuff. So
And we met in a very interesting scenario. So her day job is very adult in a way, but she brings again, she's just like me. She tries to be as young as possible. And her day job is she works for Northwestern University, which is,
okay.
an elite, college in here. And so she handles things within the graduate program and getting people through the graduate program. She's got a high end position. And her other thing she does with her sister is, so by day she's that, and at night she and her sister, they have been working the horror and sci-fi cons for like 20 years. So they have a company called Pretty Spooky, or her sister does, and she works with her on that. And it's like horror and sci-fi clothing. Anyway, I met her at a convention years ago. I was hired to DJ the celebrity after party, and I met her there, and I literally was just doing a sound check and walking around the con, and I love the cons anyway, and kind of just ran into her, and it was super dope. I was DJing with uh Jello Biafra, who was, if people know, he was the lead singer of the Dead Kennedys,
Okay.
and he does these kind of fun, kitschy, interesting Americana surf rock like DJ sets, and it's kind of fun. And then I was doing like live remixing of like horror soundtracks to like hip hop beats and scores, and adding in dialogue and doing these cool things. And then and I had done a horror mixtape years ago where I put all like horror hip hop songs together, and then I had Sid Haig and Bill Mosley kind of host it for me. And And if anybody doesn't know, they're from like Devil's Rejects and House of a Thousand Corpses and stuff like that. And then yeah, I just ended up she came up to me and I was wearing the name of my band. I have a band called She Killed in Ecstasy, which is like an electronic trip hop band, and I was wearing my shirt and she goes, "Oh, that's really cool." And she asks, "Do you like this group Thorough Kill Cult?" And I'm like, "Who doesn't?" Which is like a Chicago industrial band. Anyway, I digress. Let's talk about pop culture.
You know, it's if you don't mind, exactly. So since the show is called All Pop No Culture, and I had talked about how like you pretty much embody pop culture. Before I ask you how your love affair with pop culture began, like going back to childhood, I'm just gonna cut right to the chase. One of the things, first of all, we met in 2008. Okay, so this is like a long time ago. Okay, now fast forward to I think 2019. I was in Chicago, and you have always made it a point to make sure that I get exposed to Chicago culture. So we went to this pizza place, I think called Pequods or Pequods.
Pequod, yeah.
Pequods. And so I had this like legendary Chicago pizza. But then for the first time after knowing you for over 10 years, I saw you in a short sleeve shirt. So what I basically wanted to like get to is the tats. You got to show the
Oh,
world these tats. I mean, is that weird? Am I doing
no,
it
no, no,
correctly?
no. Uh-oh, someone wants to say hi.
Hey,
Hold on.
is
You
it
want
Rhea?
to
Oh, me? Oh, I was just looking.
Hey,
Hello.
I'm gonna see you in May. I'm so
Yes.
excited. And you're rocking the
What are
She
you
Kills in
coming
Ecstasy.
for?
I think it's good. I know you. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is it
No,
a party?
it's gonna be a huge party, the party of the century of
I hope
the
so.
conjunction of two of the dopest human beings like on the planet, straight up, and they're getting introduced to our audience, recorded and direct, cyberliciously. So thank you so much for coming through. Seriously, the energy. Yep.
Oh, look.
Yeah, the sky. The very band that I think you were wearing that shirt. You said during the when you guys first met, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
So that's
I
pretty
didn't put
awesome.
it on purpose, though. It just happens to
No,
be.
it's cosmic, man. I totally believe the energies of the
Oh,
cosmos.
Lord.
Nice seeing you. I can't wait to see you soon enough.
Straight up. It'll be here in no time.
And nice you, the other person.
Nice to meet you.
Yes, that's
Cheers.
Kevin.
All right. Sorry.
All right.
Oh,
So we were, yeah.
you're
Or-
talking about tat. Okay, so let's see how we can see.
Oh, it's
So
good.
this is all kind of like Marvel, and I don't know how much you can see.
Oh, there's
but
Iron Man. I
Oh
can see
yeah,
Iron Man.
old school Iron Man too. Yeah,
yeah, it's
Is that
all
a
like
Doc Ock in there?
1960s.
I see Magneto.
Yeah,
Hulk.
Hulk
Then Chicago with the logo, the band logo there. Is that the
Yeah.
thing?
thing. Yeah,
Yeah, there's Sting, and
Red
then
Skull.
yeah, there's
Yeah.
Red Skull, and on the back of my arm, you've got T'Challa, you got Luke Cage right there,
Yeah.
Danny Rand somewhere back there. And then back here, you got like original X-Men,
I
Doctor
see Doctor
Strange there?
Strange.
Doctor
Daredevil.
Strange, you got the twins, you've got
Galactus.
Galactus.
Nice.
There's a Thanos somewhere up there.
I see
Oh
Doc
yeah,
Ock, what's his name? Oh my god, the guy the Fantastic Four villain.
Yeah, Doctor Doom.
Thank
Doctor
you.
Doom. Yeah.
You got the Fantastic Four back here. You have the original X-Men back there. There's a Zemo right here, and you got
nice.
Vision and Carol
I mean,
Danvers
that's
and
nuts. That's nuts. And this is
Falcons
all,
back there.
I didn't know any of this. Like when we first met, it was all about hip hop and R&B. We haven't talked about the Chicago hip hop documentary yet. I mean, there's so many places we
No.
can go. But here we go. Check this out. And he did this before Disney gobbled them together.
Yeah,
Look at that.
this is
Star Wars, man.
Yeah.
Star Wars.
I got the Red Guard in there.
The
Yeah,
Emperor. Then you got Chicago represented again. First was a logo. Now we got the
Yeah.
flag. Got the Beatles.
yeah, it's the Abbey Road tattoo, and on this side I have the kind of Keith Haring inspired Tribe Called Quest logo, and there's a Moon Knight right there if you can see.
I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
how many years did it take to compile all this?
Was over a couple years that I did it all, maybe
2
like
years.
2 years.
And because this will go out to audio for anybody listening, just for the record, these aren't like some half-assed little like scrappy tattoos. These look good, like they're well done. So whoever you went to did
yeah,
an excellent
Jacob
job.
Kearney, who is thankfully a very good friend of mine, he was actually voted at one point the best tattoo artist in Chicago by Chicago Magazine.
Nice.
And I was lucky enough to kind of get in with him. He's done all my tattoos over 20 years, and I have like a big my leg, which I really can't pull up here. I have a big like that was I did that maybe maybe like 20 years ago, and I got a big Mandalorian tattoo on my leg, on my calf.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
good to
no.
know somebody. It's good to get in with somebody because that shit ain't cheap. If you get into the bigger tattoos, they even smaller ones. There's
There's Moon Knight again.
drinking out of Moon Knight.
Moon Knight, yeah.
Well, you know what, that's a not the worst lead into actually a question that I had, because I've been going through the MCU. I started at the beginning, watched them in release order. I just finished Endgame. I'm about quarter way through No Way Home, so I'm almost done with Phase 3.
Okay.
And one of the things that Andrew and I were just talking about.
Is this your first time watching, or is this a rewatch?
Oh, no, I've watched many times.
Yeah, okay.
So I've seen them all in the theater and everything. But one thing I haven't rewatched yet, and what I'm about to embark on, is Phase 4. And Andrew and I have had, I don't know if I'd call it a debate, but we definitely at least feel a little differently about Phase 4. And obviously one of those Phase 4 characters is Moon Knight, which I was super stoked for. I didn't have a ton of Moon Knight comics, but I have some Moon Knight comics downstairs, and I always liked Moon Knight. But like,
here's Phase 4 right here.
there you go.
Yeah.
Alligator Loki.
Yep.
So for me, like when we were talking about what I said is that I saw Phase 4 as a soft reboot. So I kind of
100%. And I go ahead and I'll let you finish, and then
yeah, I was just gonna say, like, for me, my expectation was closer to a Phase 1. Like, we're starting over, we're getting some new stuff. And I really kind of distanced myself from Endgame and Infinity War when thinking about Phase 4, because that was such a lofty thing. Like what they did with Infinity War and Endgame was unreal. It was untouchable. And so they have to start from the bottom and work their way up. What I realized last night in talking to Andrew about it, or texting Andrew about it, though, is the one thing that I think it was missing at the end of the Phase 4 was that coming together, that Avengers moment that Phase 1 had, because we had our Avengers movie. And there was so much content. And I get why Feige's looking at it and saying, we need to pull back a little bit. Maybe we're pumping out a little too much. But I was okay with Phase 4. Andrew liked it a little less. But it's fair. Like, that's the thing. And it's hard to remember sometimes, but you know, this thing is so big that everybody's going to have a different opinion on it.
So first of all, I'm gonna let you finish.
I'm done.
Beyonce had the greatest video of all time. No, I'm just kidding. Which is one of my favorite pop culture moments. Anyway, and as much as I love Taylor Swift, she's a sweet girl. I didn't think he lied. So I have kind of I feel like a college class fucking lecture on this. So just bear with me for a second. So first of all, Kevin Feige is making, for people that engage in comic book movies specifically, they want something specific, and comic book movies were its own thing, and they were great and they were fun. But what Kevin Feige's done with the MCU is not just a comic book movie. Now this is the existence of comic book lifestyle coming to film. It can't be, for how everything's happening, it can't be judged in a standalone basis, really. And that's what I was telling Andrew earlier, is at this point, critics need to actually be qualified to critique what they're talking about. They need to have full knowledge, or else they're simply, it's no different than if they were to criticize 5 minutes of one film and then say, oh, I didn't like this 5 minutes, I'm walking away. So when you read comics, and Kevin Feige's a comic book junkie, like all of us.
He's incredible when it comes to that.
And he likes the culture that goes with it and everything that became what it is. And what he's done is he's created the comic experience visually in film. And when I say the experience, I mean, when we read Infinity War in the 90s, or the Infinity Gauntlet, we read 12 issues a year leading up to the actual Infinity Gauntlet, which again was another 12 issues and side stories that all connected. And it was a 2-year period, and you had 30 plus issues of comics that connected. That's what we're experiencing now. Again, comics, when they go for, you also have comics that are produced in what's called volumes. So from like 1963 to like 1996 was Avengers Volume 1. All of those were one connected, cohesive universe. I mean, it's all still the 616, but it was one connective story. And then another writer came in eventually and they rebooted everything. Not rebooted the whole like origins or anything, but just kind of fresh start. And that was Avengers Volume 2. And now they're like up to like Avengers Volume 13, 14 now. And it runs for like a year now. They at a certain point, they just started shrinking them, and they would give one writer to run like a whole volume, and they would give them a year to do it. And so you started getting more volumes. Back in the day, it just went from all the volumes, ones were like 30 years. It took from the 60s to the 90s. So anyway, I digress here. Let me not get too deep in the weeds. So here we are. The Infinity Saga is like volume 1 of the MCU. You have to go, okay, the characters are introduced. We went through this experience. Thanos, blah, blah, blah. The movie's great. And another thing, you can't judge any standalone movies against Infinity War / Endgame because it's just apples to oranges. Because Infinity War and Endgame don't even stand alone on their own. They are an end cap to the whole saga. So it's just, there's no way. And it's the culmination of everything. It's impossible. It's like judging, it's like just listening to the crescendo of like a great masterpiece song and then walking away. You got to experience the whole thing. So you got to like put all that away. And the way you said it was like a soft reboot. That's exactly what it is. It's still continuation of the 616 MCU. But now we have to introduce new characters. And again, now we're getting deep in the weeds with characters. So as Andrew calls them, the casuals didn't ever have to read a comic book to know who Iron Man, the big four were. Iron Man, Hulk, Captain America, and Thor. Just didn't need any of that. You could get in and watch it. Now most of those guys are kind of, they'll come around and be around, but it's kind of like, retired, so to speak. Now you're getting new characters that are equally just as great. You just have to get connected to them. One movie is not necessarily going to connect you to them right away. You're going to get the origin story. People are going to watch these things. And I promise you, once the stakes are raised and you start seeing some of these characters interact with each other and you start seeing ensemble casts, because they won't do an Avengers film till Kang Dynasty, but you will see these guys start to form and do films like a kind of like a Winter Soldier situation.
I think the Marvels is probably the next one, right? Because we're getting three characters, although Monica Rambeau hasn't seen a ton of screen time.
Yep.
But I think with what they did with Miss Marvel, and then obviously Captain Marvel's been around, so I think that's probably the next thing. And I've actually, the reviews I've seen have said this one feels like an Avengers film.
Sure, and you're starting to get that ensemble vibe together. So, when you start seeing Shang-Chi interact with certain people, people are going to be connected more a little bit. They're going to get it more. So for me, and then again, same thing with the shows. You're going to start seeing some of the characters in the shows move their way up and graduate. Moon Knight, I saw a lot of mixed stuff with Moon Knight. Moon Knight is one of my favorites. I thought it was done amazing. I loved the effects. I loved Moon Knight was as about as perfect as I could ever. He's better than I could have imagined. Khonshu was awesome. It's definitely more of a modern version of the Moon Knight, like of Mark with I think Warren Ellis, his run, was it Ellis that did the personality. I can't remember which writer it was. I think it might have been Ellis. I forgot, but and somebody can correct us in the comments when it's there, and I'll look it up after. But it's not Ellis. I know. I'll look it up later. But
I can tell you're like, damn,
it'd drive you crazy.
I got the books over there. But they did a run where he basically was with Khonshu in the hospital, and it was basically him in a mental institution the whole time, and everything was kind of in his head. But it turns out no, he just simply like how the movie or the show played out. I thought it was brilliant. It could have been a movie. From I agree with some people that it was long, but it was a series. And I also think, and I'm not a Marvel apologist, but I also kind of think that they're figuring things out too.
Mm-hmm.
Like they figured out that how they did Werewolf by Night, which is, I mean, the top of the top of Phase 4 style. I mean, I can't recommend that enough, and that's very standalone.
For sure. Well, for now, I mean, there is some rumor that there will be some kind of overlap from that, but I'm not sure what yet.
Well, and not to go too far off, but I will say this since we're on it. Man-Thing is the most interesting part of all that.
True.
Now, Man-Thing, they kind of made him like the new Groot, Ted, and lovable, and he was effects-wise was amazing. Jack Russell, the Werewolf by Night, he's a really cool character. He's gonna be, if they do a Midnight Suns, he's part of that, and he's gonna be a big thing. I'm not sure how they're gonna play everything. I mean, that's what it feels like's happening with Black Knight and Blade and what have you, which is, for anybody that doesn't know, Midnight Suns is like the supernatural dark Avengers. They're dope. It's
what? I want to jump in for a second. So I think one of the things that actually made me excited for, so what Kevin was alluding to ultimately was, I think even today he was saying how he considered Phase 4 like Phase 1. And I was expecting, just being real.
That's what it is. It's a reboot.
Yeah. I was expecting, it's no secret that I was definitely team DCEU. And I became MCU grudgingly. I wasn't a beginner, right? So I was just kind of like, so when BVS and Civil War, BVS and Civil War came out same year, 2016, that was when I finally said, okay, if I stay DCU after this, you're kidding yourself. Like, stop the madness, okay? And the first crack in my DCEU fandom was Winter Soldier, because when Superman's killing motherfuckers, whereas Winter Soldier's taking bullets and saying, I'm with you to the end of the line, I sat there in the theater and said, Captain America just out Superman. Damn. I was just
for sure.
So for me, it's Phase 1 and Phase 2 are not going to grab me. They're actually going to make me go, ew, because I wasn't, I respect you, but I don't think you're superior. Phase 3 was when I was like, oh shit. And I feel like Marvel's Phase 3 was untouchable. So basically, I wanted Phase 4 to go no lower than Phase 2. And I feel like that's what it is right now. But the thing is, my expectations were maybe too high. Maybe they were unreasonable. I wasn't expecting Endgame or Infinity War, but I also was not expecting, and I'm being a dick now, but I was expecting Iron Man 3 and The Dark World. And I feel like these Phase 4 has kind of coasted up just above that level, with a few bright spots.
I think when it plays out, on rewatches, you're going to grow to love those
And
movies.
you know what?
way
And
more.
I hope so, because this is why. Because I remember when Ultron came out in 2015, mind you, I was still Team DCEU. I was like, yes, because Ultron wasn't actually received very well. People were like, it seems kind of like a step down. But now, when you go back and watch Ultron,
It's
you're
a
like,
keystone.
man, dude, like everything, all the seeds were laid there. Even the Iron Man sacrificing himself, Cap, like everything was.
And when that came out, we didn't even know what was happening yet.
Correct. It was
but
just
Kevin
like,
knew the plan.
there was 3 branches. Like, it's literally Ragnarok, Black Panther, and Civil War. All 3 of those movies have roots in Ultron. So I hope you're right. I hope I go back to the Eternals and go, wow, this is amazing. And I go back to but I do think Quantumania is going to be there. And one more thing, because by the way, this is what I do on this podcast. I fucking rant. I got to give you props, Kevin, because you said some profound shit last time. And what you said was, even though No Way Home and Doctor Strange, something of madness, Multiverse of Madness, were about the multiverse, ironically, Quantumania felt more multiversal than those 2 films. Like, I actually bought that. And Chad, you said, when we talked, you said this feels like they're at the starting block and they just shot the gun and it's off to the races.
Yeah, once Kang, the end of that movie, and once we saw that mid-credit scene, that was the gunshot. We're off to the races. Now it's boom with the phases. Phase 4, Kev, you're right on the money with the soft reboot. We have to introduce these characters. These are characters that most people don't know. As much as I am a comic book reader and I know Shang-Chi a lot, it's still kind of a reintroduction of Shang-Chi to me. Mind you, Shang-Chi was actually probably my favorite I just rewatched Phase 4 again.
I loved it. I really enjoyed that one. So
yeah, I mean, I love Shang-Chi so much. I love Simu Liu too. We're big fans of Kim's Convenience. So he was great in that. Aquafina was funny. I loved everything about it, and I can't wait to see what the director does with his next. I think he's doing Kang Dynasty. So Eternals, that one might still kind of lay low, kind of in a dark world place for a lot of people. As much as I love the MCU, the Eternals was a slow burn. It's a Chloe Zhao movie. It's definitely Chloe. It's super melodramatic. It's arguably the absolute best shot Marvel film and the most beautiful.
It is beautiful, 100%.
Yeah.
I was excited for 2 reasons. Extra in that movie. 90s was a big, late 80s, 90s was a big Avengers era for me. And Cersei and Black Knight were a big item, and they were a big part of the running the Avengers. Cersei basically led the Avengers of Black Knight then, and I loved seeing Cersei. A lot of the other Eternals were kind of, we'll see how much they play out in the MCU. In the comics, they're not very overly relevant. I mean, there's storylines with them and stuff like that, but they're not in the pantheon of everything. They're not, they're not grade A. I love seeing Star Fox, who was a big, which in a million years I never thought we'd ever see on screen because his power set is super inappropriate. And Pip was really dope. So I love that, but I love Gemma Chan as Cersei, and I'm like was amazed. She was gorgeous and really conveyed that empathy vibe. And then Black Knight. I mean, Kit Harington as Dane Whitman. Oh my God. Like, I can't wait. And then you got Blade hiding in the corner of the room. Are you ready for that, Mr. Whitman? Like, let's go.
Which is
that's
also
what was exciting for me.
That reminded me of, because right now, like, we are kind of like in a horror, it feels like we're in a horror renaissance right now as far as like what's happening in the movies. So if I were the MCU, and they obviously plan everything out so far in advance, but I would kind of ride that wave, because we saw how good Werewolf by Night was. if we do this Midnight Suns thing with Black Knight and Blade and everything else, it's almost lining up with where I think audiences are. There's so much horror at the movies, and we love it. We want more of it. I mean, what are your thoughts?
What's his name? Michael? I can never say his last
Giacchino?
name. Let him do
All
let
of it.
him do that.
Yes.
And as much as I love Sam Raimi as a horror director who's now in the MCU, I want him to do it because I love that style. But Multiverse of Madness to me was amazing, and it was amazing because it was Evil Dead Part 4 ultimately, and I loved everything about that. Yeah, we're a horror house. Look at this.
Yes. There you go.
Nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Look at that. Just right there. I think you were trying to get me to get on Shudder, I think. Was that the streamer?
Oh yeah, Shudder's the horror streaming service. They got all the
yeah.
they have a lot of independent horror films too. A lot of stuff that you're not gonna, or that's harder to find.
Yeah, Rhea, we're a horror family. Rhea is very close personal friends to Tony Todd. She's very close with Tony.
Oh, nice.
The Candyman. My good friend is Ari Lehman. He played Jason in Friday the 13th. He actually played on my actual like band release. He played piano on one of my songs. So yeah, we got like kind of deep.
Now, I know this is almost like, choosing between children, but like if you had, well, I guess what were you exposed to first? Horror? I think it's pretty obvious, unless I shouldn't assume though. Was it horror or was it like comics or music?
Kind of well, I mean, I grew up in a music household. My mom playing Beatles and soul records, and I grew up on the south side of Chicago, so music was bumping, especially pre-internet. Music was bumping out of every crib in the block.
Mm-hmm.
It was also, I grew up in 47, so I grew up during the birth of hip-hop, and I grew up during the birth of house music with a brother 11 years older than me playing classic and experimental rock all the time. So I grew up with that. Then comics. My whole, and I have absolutely no shame or anything saying that literally I didn't grow up with a father. My father was comics, and my moral compass is legitimately based off of Captain America. My whole moral compass is based off of Steve Rogers.
Wow.
When I got in a big fight in high school, somebody asked me why I did that, and I told them I punched that kid because that's what Steve Rogers would do.
That's what's up, man.
They laughed, and I'm like, yeah, no,
Yeah.
you would have busted that kid's nose too. But no violence, kids. But horror was another part of my life at a young age. The first movie I rented when we got a VCR in 1984, yeah, like late 84, we got a VCR, and my brother took us to the video store, the local video store, and the first two movies we got, ironically, were both by the same director, and they were both horror movies. Both were Wes Craven films. We got Last House on the Left, which I never should have watched at 10 years old, 11 years old, and Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
That
I
was
knew
the first.
Elm Street had to be one of them. Had to be.
Yeah,
and I was obsessed with Freddy Krueger as much. Now, horror was never, I was never like into the dark side of it. I was into the fun side of horror and stuff like that. That's why I continue to be all a part of it. But and it's always been fun for me. But Last House it's a great film. It's a remake of a classic Swedish story by Ingrid Bergman called the Virgin Spring. It's called, was the original Swedish movie that it's based off of from the 30s or 40s. But great classic tale. But I just, for a 10-year-old, that was a massively intense film.
Yeah.
You ever seen it, Andrew?
It? No. And I'm like totally, like, I used to be the person who didn't want to watch a lot of horror because I have an active imagination and I don't want to give myself nightmare fuel. But I think for some reason there's been a shift, and I can now kind of put it in a little capsule and be like, this is just entertainment.
It's not monster horror, it's reality, real, like it's the real horror. It's a rape revenge film.
Yeah, but it's been a long time. Like, I don't remember a lot, but it's very real world based, right? Like,
real world. It's graphic, and it is a remake of an old, like I said, an old Swedish story, which it's dark. It's the most dark, serious tone thing Wes Craven's ever done, and it was his first film. And again, because it's low budget, it felt more like almost like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It was very gritty and real and seedy. And the Texas Chainsaw Massacre feels like you're watching a snuff film sometimes because it's like so that it's the damn near Super 8 film, the film stock that they use, all that, everything, the guerrilla aspect of the film. Nothing will ever come close to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is an absolute masterpiece. That film will make you understand, and they don't even show a lot of blood. The craziest thing about that film is if you in a room with people and you turn that up and you really play it through your stereo, what's going to disturb people most is the constant sound of the chainsaw and the constant screaming and the guttural like fear, and you'll walk away with like shivers because it was just insane, and there's barely any blood or gore shown in that.
Because everything was off screen in Texas Chainsaw because they didn't have the budget to show it.
And it is an absolute masterpiece, and it plays on a real American horror story. It plays on he's a
real person.
Not far from here. He was an hour and a half from where you know what, talk about real horror. I live 1 block off of Somerset, and if you go to 1 block Somerset and take that 1.5 miles that way, 2 miles that way, you'll run right into Gacy's house.
No shit.
Yeah. About 2 miles from where Gacy was at.
That's crazy.
The house is torn down now and everything, and they tore down the house, and the lots kind of like they wouldn't let anybody even build on that lot. They got rid of the address.
Wow.
That reminds me of they changed the address of the Amityville house. It's still up, obviously, but they changed it because I think it was like I think it's 112 Ocean Drive, the town of Amityville in Long Island, and they've changed the address. Funny how that works. Totally random. Reminds me of, have you seen that movie Barbarian by chance?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
I loved it. It was absolutely one of my absolute favorite films of any genre of the year last year.
That's what's up. So that's all also like I thought about abandoned houses and stuff like that, and like man, that was pretty freaky.
Yeah, I think for me, and we've talked about it, but what set that movie apart is that it starts off as what feels like a very specific movie. You have a very specific actor in Bill Skarsgård.
Yeah.
And you have a very specific scenario that feels, for sure this guy's going to murder this girl in this house. He's the bad guy. That's what's happening. And to their credit, the advertising that they did leading up to it did not stray you from this feeling at all.
Nope.
So
it felt like you've been there and done it, and you're like, oh, I know what's happening.
Yeah. And then it's fucking madness after that. And everybody's brilliant in it. What's his name?
Justin Long.
Yeah, Justin Long. Fantastic.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
The best, without giving anything away to anybody, the best version of that type of person, like that character, which we all know the highest level D-bags like that. He plays the highest level D-bag. And I don't believe Justin is like that in real life. He played it so good, you'd think he could be it. But just the end of that, everything about that movie, it was fun, it was scary, the comedy was on point. Like, they had everything. That and Black Phone. I went into Black Phone thinking it was going to be another modern movie that I've seen 40 times. And it was so good. Yeah, and it was done by
Scott Derrickson. Did obviously the first Doctor Strange.
And Ethan Hawke again. He used Ethan, which
he was so good in that.
He was really
good. My god. Yeah. And it nailed the concept of it. Really took me back to the 80s.
Yes.
Where we had that
scare.
I mean, we invented, well, our knucklehead parents helped invent the issue with child kidnapping. And I say that because it's funny, because everyone has those memes. Generation X and millennials, that kind of border. I'm 75. I was born in 75, so I grew up in the late 70s really grew up in the 80s. When I was walking down the block, walking home from school with a literal fear. I mean, I remember Adam Walsh like this. And half the kids that were like the Atlanta child murders and all that stuff was embedded in my brain because it was all network news before kind of cable. And we walked home from school. If you were alone at any point, you were constantly like borderline. In my head, immediately I was looking for a van at all times. Like, and any van that you saw was like, oh, that's it, I'm dead. Like you would literally have this irrational fear because, the stuff that was put into your brain by the news, right? They were very good at their job. But they did, like, kids got kidnapped because there were so many latchkey kids and it was so easy. I see like people put memes up like, back when I grew up in the 80s, we were so tough because we rode big wheels off of cliffs and whatever, some ridiculous meme. And I'm like, yeah, we had no parents. Our parents were like, like off at a bar smoking or, like whatever they were doing. It was, and I love my parents and I love everyone, parents around me in the 80s, and I wouldn't change any way I grew up. But really, it was prime territory for these crazies to come out of the woodwork. So again, that movie really nailed it. Like, because we kind of lived in that crazy time where that stuff was absolutely real. And I'll say this really quick, and not to jump off of pop culture, but it is kind of connected to culture.
Totally.
Do you remember in the 80s, the phrase satanic panic?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that started in Chicago here because of a group. God, what were they called? It was 4 dudes, and they were called the Chicago. I'm surprised they're not more in pop culture up with Gacy and all these guys, because out of them came the term satanic panic, because they were literally claiming to be Satanists. And there was a group of 4 dudes, younger guys, mid-20s, and they were going around Chicago kidnapping men and women, mostly women. And they were taking him to again, not super far from here, they were taking him to a house, and they were performing satanic ritualistic murders. And they were literally believed they were getting powers from the devil, and they were brutalizing these people. And like, God, I forgot the name of their really catchy name the news
sounds very Paymon-ish.
It was like the mid 80s, early 80s, and that kind of brought, or early 80s, and they brought the one of the guys, and the reason I bring this up too is not too long ago, one of the guys just recently got out of jail, and he's been and he was mentally disabled. He was I don't know if he had Down syndrome or he has some sort of mental handicap, disability, and they use this kid and totally, like, I don't necessarily know how that kid could have been put in jail for that long, because none of that, he had no way of, he was completely like lured into this by all these crazies, like these dudes that were with him.
That's probably why he got out before the rest of them, maybe.
Well, yeah, I think the rest of them, were killed, but this kid still served like 30 years, which I don't necessarily think is necessarily
crazy.
He got out and he was having problems. Anyway, this is getting really way off topic, so we'll go back to.
Well, it's funny that you bring up satanic panic, because I think Andrew and I will probably save the conversation for next week, but we're finishing up the Conjuring franchise. We're watching all of those. And one of the things that they brought up specifically, like when what I was reading around this last the last film, and basically anything involving what's their names, the Warrens, they kind of rose to fame during this whole satanic panic thing, because people were looking to experts in this field to get involved in this weird stuff. Anybody that knew it wasn't necessarily that people 100% believed in what they did, but they believed in their knowledge of what was out there. And that made them more valuable. and the final film, the
Devil Made
The
Me
Devil
Do It.
Made Me Do It, was specifically around that, because this whole what happened in real life was a court case. And that's where, like, The Devil Made Me Do It was his argument. He's the first person to argue in the
Yep.
US
I thought it was a wonderful film. Like,
possession.
I mean,
Yeah.
what they used, how they did it was great.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was cool. And we'll, we can dig into our opinions on it next week, because we've got the whole world to cover. But it was cool, and it was interesting to see. It's just funny, like I said, you're talking about Satanic Panic, and that's what kicked off most of the Warrens' fame. They did a lot of stuff, but their fame really came out of them getting involved, or her getting involved in detective work and things like that, because they kind of set the tone for police departments everywhere, and involving
Yep.
psychics and involving other people.
Yeah. I'm super excited you guys are dropping this. I'm super excited you guys are getting into horror specifically and I know, Kevin, you're already a horror guy, which is
Yeah.
awesome. I love that Andrew's getting in it, and I thank you for getting Andrew more into it, because horror is one of the absolute to me, it's as fun as comic book movies. While it can be scary, that's part of the fun. That's like the more real and scary and crazy a movie is that actually affects me, the more fun I get out of it.
That actually brings something up, because I think that horror, like comedy, is very subjective, and I think that certain things affect people differently. So, like, one of the things that I've noticed about me, and I don't think I'm alone, but I do think there's other people who are like not like me, and that is, like, for me, like, when I actually see the thing, like, it actually scares me more. So, like, for example, in the first Conjuring, like, I'm okay with, like, glimpses and, like, things moving and whatever. That's cool. It's like, I can handle that, okay? Because in real life, it's just a thing moving. Like, it's not really gonna, like, fuck with me, right? But when, like, in the first Annabelle, where like, there's a knock at the door. Sorry, there's a knock at the door, and the woman opens the door and then closes it, and then all of a sudden there's a, like, fucking demon on the fucking ceiling, and it's like, and, like, pulls her out. I said nope. I turn it off because it's like 1:30 in the morning, and I'm good. Like, I wasn't ready, Whereas other people, they see that and go, see, that can't happen, and they're completely checked out. They're like, okay, I'm out, So I saw
you have an imagination.
What's up?
And that you have an imagination. When people
Thank you.
try to, like, overanalyze things, they're just doing themselves a disservice. You're taking yourself out of things.
I appreciate that, man. I really do. I respect both perspectives, though. But you're right. My imagination is crazy good, dude. So that's why, like, for me, if I see, like, it's like, oh man, like that. It's almost like Sesame Street. I'm so random. Where, like, I was a 4-year-old, and those, like, yup, like, those, like, things, those aliens, and they'd literally be outside of the house in Sesame Street, and they'd teleport inside the house. As a kid, I was done. I turned off the TV. So I'm like, look, if they can teleport from that outside the house to inside the house, what's stopping them from teleporting out from the TV into here? I'm turning it off until they're done, and then I'll turn the TV on. Anyway, that's my brain. Anyway, that was a long lead into, like, what are your, like, for you, what were the scariest horror films? Because there's lots of, like, I posted articles talking about Sinister being, like, the scariest movie ever, and we watched it and we're like, it's all right. Like, it wasn't like that scary. Yeah. So, like, for you as a horror, like, expert, like, scary ones for you.
So Supernatural, if done right, tends to actually creep me out and give me nightmares and all those things that come with the great effects of a horror movie, almost like a drug. Supernatural films mess me up more than, like,
slasher
other type. But slasher films are scary too, to a degree, especially if they're, like, based on true stories and things like that, because it's real horror, and real horror really messes me up. Modern films, Hereditary creeps me out on the highest level. We just rewatched it again. Amazing film. When she starts banging her head on the thing, and I'm like, I mean, just thinking about it, I get like goosebumps. It creeps me out, and it was done so well. A different type of horror, but another movie that creeps me out is Midsummer. The stuff that happens in that, and that's more of a gross factor of the things like again done so well. Different type of horror. Supernatural films. I mean, I have favorites too based on fun factor. I'm kind of over traditional zombie films, just because I've been a horror fan for so long that like from 10 years old watching Night of the Living Dead to Dawn of the Dead and living through all of that, like it has to be real creative. I thought Zack Snyder's greatest moment in the history of anything he's ever done is the Dawn of the Dead remake.
I never saw that one, actually.
That's the one in the mall, right?
Yeah. It's his crowning moment of filmmaking. I'm not a Snyder hater. I'm just saying, like, that was amazing. The Evil Dead remake's really good for remakes. It's crazy gory and scary, and gory too sometimes can be over the top too much for me. Like I feel like sometimes I would rather see gratuitous gore to be fun, where it's just insanely goofy and fun, where it's supposed to be, that's the gag, versus someone trying too hard and there's too much gore.
Did you see the most recent Texas Chainsaw remake?
Yeah, I mean,
that one for me was super gory.
Yeah,
to the point that like I thought it was too much because it didn't benefit the story. Yeah.
No, I agree. We were okay with it. Here's the great thing, and I'm happy that I have the ability to do this. They do so many remakes, they do so many sequels. I have a uncanny mutant ability to just go, okay, this is my versions stop and start, and those can exist and you can have that, but my canon is this. I can, I'm like, the remakes are fine, but to me this is perfect. This is the canon that best works. Like Halloween is one of those things that has so many versions, and so many like kind of almost universes that they try to do just through the reboots and all that. I love Rob Zombie as a creative. Despise the Rob Zombie remakes personally. I know that's very divisive because a lot of people love him, which is fine. Didn't like him, and I really did not like the Danny McBride kind of like reattempt to continue the Laurie Strode story. It just didn't do it for me. Again, it's not terrible. It's not for me. I've watched them. I'll give them a go. My perfect Halloween is Halloween 1 and 2, and those two nights, and Loomis dies in the hospital and Michael dies in the hospital. And the crazy thing to me is Halloween isn't about Laurie. It's about the relationship between Loomis and Michael Myers, and Laurie's just an antagonist, but or protagonist, but just a vessel kind of for Michael, to a reason for Michael to be where he's at, because it wasn't his sister, it wasn't any of that stuff. It was just a babysitter who was fixed on, and it was about the relationship with the doctor and him, and I love that. And Halloween 3 is one of the greatest films ever, in my opinion. I love Halloween 3, and everybody hates it, but it has nothing to do with the Michael story. It's its own standalone attempt, because John Carpenter to me is probably the greatest director of all time for me. And I know people are like, you're crazy, but
I have not seen. So this is what's crazy. I have not seen Halloween. I have not seen Nightmare on Elm Street, and I have not seen Friday the 13th.
Oh, dude!
Oh, the originals?
You have not
none
seen,
of them.
You got
none of them.
Nightmare on Elm Street. Okay, first of all, wait. So first of all, a couple weeks back, like we discovered that you hadn't seen like planes, trains, and automobiles, and we fixed that.
Right.
I am
And
so
that's,
sorry. I
definitely-
apologize because I hope I didn't like ruin anything. Just like
I will forget by the
remember.
time
It's
I
all
watch
good.
them. Do not
Yeah.
worry. Nothing up here sticks, so we're good. I'm old.
But yeah, Nightmare. That's like that. I mean, okay. So first of all, I would just say this, and I haven't seen all the Nightmares. Okay. But
You
I
don't need
will
to.
say though that like, okay, one obviously is a fucking classic. It'll remind you of Scream a little bit because I feel like
One of the most brilliant
Scream
stories and concepts
ever.
ever.
Two is like its own thing. And and actually I remember it was a great metaphor and it was ahead of its time actually, because it's really about like identity, basically. The third one is actually like an Avengers movie. Like I love that one because my whole thing, that's why I like the priest who could turn the pool into water. The third one is called the Dream Warriors. So basically,
Yeah, it's totally X-Men.
Freddy is a killer, okay? Like you can't kill Freddy. Like Freddy is scary, but this movie, like these motherfuckers are fighting back, and like they all have powers and shit. And I'm like, yes, if I'm gonna go out, at least let me go down swinging, okay? And that's where and Nancy comes back from the first movie. I love that too. It was actually the first kind of interconnected shit going on. So then in the fourth one, the Dream Child, I think I fell off, and that was it.
Dream Master.
Dream Master, that's right. Is the fifth one the Dream Child then?
Crazy enough, not just to
Yeah.
continue, the girl Alice from Dream
Four?
Master
Yeah,
is currently one of the contestants on that MILF Manor. Side note. Go ahead.
that was some pop culture shit right there.
We were watching it, and then don't ask why we were watching it, but we were watching it, and it was.
I watched Love Island, so
and we're sitting there watching this abomination of human trash on TV, and all of a sudden this girl comes in, it's Lisa, and I'm like, oh my god, that's Lisa Wilcox. Rhea's like, what? I'm like, that's Lisa, that's Alice from Nightmare 4. And then she goes, oh, I was an actress in the 80s, and I'm like,
done. That's amazing. Anyways, we'll have so Kev, you gotta watch at least one. Actually,
my take is like from listening to the world over time is that if you're gonna watch these classic horror franchises, it's like one or two films and then just stop.
Yes,
because and we've talked about this, how
diminishing,
especially in horror, the longer a franchise goes, the cornier and crappier it becomes, because they have to start appealing to the mass audiences, and they have to do the cheap scares, and they have to like lean into all this other junk that doesn't work. But when you watch a film that is either a standalone or one or two films, they can be the film they're supposed to be.
Halloween 1 and 2 when you watch them back to back, it's the continuation of the night. It's perfect filmmaking. It's Carpenter. It's genius. It's cliche in the sense that it invented the cliches. That's where it came from. Nightmare on Elm Street is an amazing original story. I think part 2 is even better. It's scarier than the first one. Again, 3 is, Dream Warriors. Friday the 13th, I would say you can watch the first 4 because they're all legitimately scary. After that, it turns into zombie Jason, which is a whole nother like genre of Jason. But Jason is the end all be all of slashers, and it's legit. It's good fun. It's good creative kind of kills to say, from a special effects, and you see stuff and you're like, because that's the whole thing about Jason is how is he going to kill people in this way, how creative ways. And again, back then it was creative in the sense that it wasn't like the character trying to be creative killing someone. He would just use things around him, and then they would have these amazing ways he saw people die. And it was like watching that show, 1,000 Ways to Die, but in a movie before that came out. So they're all brilliant, and they all definitely deserve a watch for sure.
Yeah, I've got to find it. They've been on my list for a long time, and I never get to them because I'm always watching, newer stuff, and it's hard to go back sometimes. And then when you do want to go back, you go to find it and you can't find anything anywhere. So there's that.
Definitely, if you don't have it, get Shudder. Usually, a lot of those are on there.
Okay.
Have you seen Skinamarink yet?
I haven't. I might eventually get into it. I've just heard it's so brutal to get through from a lot of people I trust.
All right. That's fair. I haven't seen it either. I know they were trying to hail it as like the next like almost like Paranormal Activity, like a low budget film that, you know, is successful. But yeah, I just haven't. Well, A, I gotta get Shudder, and then B, I gotta give it a watch. But there's so much to watch. I actually haven't watched The Devil Made Me Do It yet. I was too busy watching Picard.
Yeah, so that's why.
And we'll get to that at some point too. But as well as The Last of Us, because I know that you also caught up, right? You're all
I
caught
am
up?
caught up, and I will say I was a little hesitant. Rhea played the game years ago when it came out, so she was up on it. I was hesitant because I was like, not another zombie thing, but I was remarkably pleasantly surprised about the concept, how it's not zombies, it's a way better, more unique, actually believable, realistic pandemic situation. Realistic in the sense that, you know, if the perfect storm happened, something like this could happen, right? Because I mean, the fungus that's a real fungus, and
Yeah,
what I understand, it actually, like, in real life, it takes over, like, it can take over ant
Ants.
colonies, and it's like a whole thing where they do crazy things, and they'll literally go kill themselves to get out of the colony and all that, and it's, which is amazing. You know, it's obviously slightly far-fetched, but the concept of something like that happening is believable, which makes it real and scary. And I'm usually not super into overly melodramatic horror that's like a soap opera, but this doesn't feel like that to me. And that third, did you watch the third episode? Has everybody seen that?
Oh yeah.
With Nick Offerman, you seen that, Andrew?
Yes.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, we
that was some of the best TV I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I was in tears at the end of that show.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
That was like,
and that episode was brilliant because even for somebody like me, I played the game multiple times. It's my favorite game of all time. I told the guys I bought it on the PlayStation 3 when it came out because it was like the last great game on the PlayStation 3. It looked better than everything that came out. They remastered it on the PlayStation 4. I played it on there. I finally got my PlayStation 5. The first game I bought was the PlayStation 5 remake of The Last of Us. First game I played on my PlayStation 5. So
awesome.
Like this game has always been my thing. And so like I remember a few years ago with one of my friends at pickup, like she's didn't play games, and I was like I wish that this was a story that I could give to people because the story is incredible. And if you don't game, there's no reason you would ever get into it. I mean, some people like to watch other people play video games. There's a small subset of people that do that. But to me, it's not very interesting to just sit and watch somebody else play. This game is so cinematic.
And it came out before Twitch and all that. So it was.
Oh, yeah. 2013. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a long time. And then when they announced they were doing it as a show, I was like, okay, I was worried. And then all of a sudden, Neil Druckmann, the original creator, is involved, and Craig Mazin from Chernobyl's involved. And then I'm like, okay, I'm feeling good. And none of what happens in that third episode almost entirely happens in the game. So that was entirely new material for this show. So that was like a pleasant surprise for me. And it was fucking incredible. Like, I mean, we've talked about every episode so far, except for the most recent one. And the show's just done brilliant things with storytelling, with character development, with everything they've done. So it's been really great because I've been talking about having a friend of ours come on for after the final episode, who has arguably played the game more times than I have, or inarguably. I know he's played the game more times than I have, and so we're gonna break it down at the end. But to see this story, and I've talked to him a few times about it, to see this story be handed to other people and see them to eat it up the same way we did as a game is really fucking special, because it sort of, when you tell people, oh, this is my favorite game, you should know the story, people are like, it's a fucking video game, you dipshit. They're like whatever, nerd. And now it's the biggest TV show on the planet. So like it's really cool to see that happen.
The casting's amazing from my perspective. How do you feel as a gamer with Pedro and Bella?
It was so tough because when it was coming out, one of the what everybody wanted at the time Ellen Page, who was too fucking old. She was like 30.
Yeah.
But one of the things that they had is when they were designing the character, and this actually ended up being almost a lawsuit, or it was a lawsuit, the character was looked too much like Ellen Page at the time. And so they had to deal with that legally. Joel obviously was created, doesn't look like anybody. Troy Baker looks completely different. But what people really wanted was Ellen Page, and they wanted Wolverine, Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, okay.
Because and that was coming off the heels of Logan, which is a very similar story, the lone wolf and cub idea. And
great original.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, lone wolf
and everybody wanted that, and then then you all of a sudden you're casting Diego Luna and Pedro Pascal, and everybody's like, oh my god, there's why are they doing this, so woke and all this shit. And I'm like, dude, let them be completely different. Number one, Joel is from Texas, so him having any kind of Latin blood in him makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
like it's fine. And then and then when they cast Danny Newton's daughter, people were like, what, she wasn't black? I'm like, dude, it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter if you tell the story right. It just doesn't matter. The only character that
100%.
was played by the same actress is Merle Dandridge playing not Tess. I'm totally blanking on her name right now.
The Firefly, but I
yeah. And when I heard
Marlene
Bella Ramsey, what's that?
Marlene, I think her name.
Marlene,
yes,
there you go.
Correct.
I had Merle in my head and I couldn't get it out. When they cast Bella Ramsey, I was stoked. Like, I know there were a lot of people that, I don't know, they want somebody a little cutesier or whatever, but she's adorable. Oh my God, she's amazing. And all I could see was the girl from Game of Thrones with so much attitude there. And I was like, that's perfect. It's a different attitude, but she can do attitude. And she can. Like, she really can. She's amazing.
She's adorable.
She's fantastic. And she's the perfect casting because in real life, she's 19. The character is 14, but the second game, which they're going to do for the second season, is a 5-year time jump. So she's 19. So if they jump that, she's exactly the right age. And I've just, the whole way, I've had no problems with casting. There's still a few characters to show up that I'm curious to see what people do with them. Not next episode, but the following episode, we're going to see a character named David. And I'm super stoked to see what they do with him because he's a very interesting character in the game. Played by Nolan North. I don't know if you know who that is, but he's been around for a long time. Lots of voice acting, video game acting. He's the voice. If you ever played the original Uncharted or seen that, he's Nathan Drake in those games.
I like the movie Uncharted too, the version of
I did too. Yeah. And I had to it's like you said, you have to compartmentalize and take this as something completely different, because the games, if you only looked at the games, all anybody wanted to cast for the movie was Nathan Fillion, because the character in the games has that same snarky attitude, and by the fourth game looks exactly like Nathan Fillion. Like it's like when they did the what's the comic book series that they're bringing back, Marvel's bringing back, the Ultimates, when they first did Nick Fury in the Ultimates, and he looked exactly like Sam Jackson.
Yep.
And then they end up casting Sam Jackson because who the fuck else can you cast at that point?
Well, funny, and I don't want to go too off, but since you mentioned that, Sam Jackson agreed to the likeness because he said, when it's time to do a movie, I'll agree as long as I'm cast.
Yeah. So nice. Which is too bad they couldn't get David Hasselhoff a second time. But do you know that? Do you know, Andrew, that David Hasselhoff played in a Nick Fury movie?
I've never seen it, but I've heard of it.
There's
the dark days of Marvel movies.
Yeah, the very dark days.
Dolph Lundgren is
the Punisher.
Yeah.
And But yeah, for me, like speaking like of Uncharted, I had a blast with that movie. It was they took things from the game. It was not spot on. But like for me, when I see something that's made in that way, and I see somebody like Nolan North, who played the main character, Nathan Drake in 4 different games, go on set, meet Tom Holland, say, hey, this is awesome, go do your thing, this is yours now, blah blah blah. To me, that's good enough. If the person that was the guy says this new thing has my stamp of approval, whether he loves it or not, is just saying, like, I've handed the reins over, then I think that's fantastic. I think that's super cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
We live not too far from Midway gaming company, not Midway airport, but Midway gaming company is not too far from here. And back when they created Mortal Kombat, all the dudes that were the characters were based off of were all like local dudes that worked there, local friends of friends that were like worked in bars and stuff around the area. So all those guys, like the original like base for like Liu Kang and like, like Johnny Cage and they're all like local guys that live here. And it's funny, we see them at conventions and stuff, and you're like, oh my god,
That's awesome.
Shao Kahn. There's
So
Jax.
So if you're caught up, I mean, we can talk about it now since we're kind of already on it. But the 6th episode of The Last of Us is an interesting one because, again, talking about the changes they made from the game to the show. In the game, when you first meet Tommy, they go to that dam that you see for like a minute. And everything happens at that dam. What happens in the game is they're trying to get the dam back up, powered up and online. And so everything happens there. Everything we see happens there. She runs away from there. They chase her down to a farmhouse. And then they have that conversation, with you have no idea what loss is and all that stuff.
Sure.
But in this one, it's funny because they said in the original game they wanted to do all that stuff in Jackson, but they didn't have the budget for the game to do this entirely different environment. Sure. So they just did it in the one location.
So they're getting to now do it how they wanted to.
Yeah, they get to do it the way they want. Plus, Jackson is a key location in the second game and series. So it actually, even though it wasn't in the first game, looks so much like it does in the second game that it's amazing. And so everything happens there, and it's fine. The things that you need to get out of it are all the things that happen in the episode. You start to, and again, the storytelling is different. One of the things that Joel does in the game or in the show so well is show his age. Like he talks about how he's deaf in one ear, how his knees hurt, all this stuff. And they laughed when they made the show because they're like, he can't be the character he is in the game. In the game, yeah, he's supposed to be like 50 something, but he's basically a superhero, right? Like he's crouched down and crawling around on his knees all the time. And one of the mechanics in the game, like if you want to know what's around the corner, you press a button and it kind of does the sonar thing, and you kind of see what's around you. It's not implying that he has sonar, but like they're trying to use a method of showing what's around you.
Shows his intuition and his ability to
exactly
be aware of his surroundings and what's out there.
Yeah, and so in the show, they're like, dude, he's 50 something. Like he's not going to be crouched down, crawling around all the time, and he's deaf in one ear. And so they've really been able to humanize him in a way that you can't always do in a video game, because if you make a video game about somebody that's super normal, it's kind of boring, right? Like you can't do all the stuff you can do in a video game, and you're gonna die. Like that's
People
the only thing. Like in a video
that
game,
are better than themselves. That's what they. Yeah. And
so he's superhuman. So in the show, he's having panic attacks around knowing that he can't take care of, like he's not doing a good job taking care of this girl, and the further along they get, the more he starts to think about his own daughter and how he let her down.
Of course,
and it eats him up. So we see him having his panic attacks. He's ready to give up on her. She overhears the conversation. That moment in the room when it's just him and her, and he has the you don't know what loss is. And she's like, everybody else has left me except for you. And she shoves him. That's all. That scene is almost exactly from the video game. There's one line missing, but otherwise it's exactly like the video game. And I think the line is when he says no in the show. There's a longer line in the game where he says, "You're treading on mighty thin ice right now," because he's talking about his daughter, or she's talking about his daughter, kind of out of turn to him in that moment. But everything kind of plays out the same, and it's really cool to see this different episode still work. It's
been a blast.
Yeah. And when she shoves him, right, she's talking to him, she's like, everybody's left me except for you. Well, that is also directly from the game, but it took them so many takes to get that in the game, because they said they weren't getting the right energy from it, and they just weren't, and everybody's getting frustrated, so they took a break. They came back. It was not written in the script, and so Ashley Johnson was doing her lines, and she walked up and she shoved him in that part, and they were like, holy shit, we got it. Like, that was the thing that was missing, and so they carried it over into the show.
That's awesome. I've seen the YouTube cut split screen, the split screen, cut scene comparisons, and they're so on point, and they've done such a good job recreating that. And that kudos to them for the creators and HBO and the producers for embracing what the fandom wants out of it.
For sure.
I'm sure as a fan you'll accept things, but the closer they can get it to the game and the truer they can, obviously, again, you have to have a little bit of like the MCU. It's a comic book versus reality. The genius thing about Kevin Feige is he started everything off in a reality based situation where he brought everybody into this believable world and slowly introduced things that were a little bit more superpowered or what have you. And now we're at a point where we're in multiverse situations. We're going to go super cosmic. I mean, all this stuff to us is just standard, and our answers is because comic books, you just accept it. Now he's got everybody. And again, the Fox X-Men, in my eyes, were terrible for a lot of reasons. As a comic book fan, Chris Claremont, the creator of them, said they were. I totally agree. He's like, the worst thing is, like, I gave them individual looks to create individuality and show that the whole point of the X-Men were culturally significant to show Marvel's always been on top of it, inclusion and culture and all these different things, and bring all these different people in. And they Singer just destroyed it with those costumes and
they sterilized everying,
and made it. And Kevin Feige, from what I had read or heard somewhere, that Kevin Feige was a PA on the set, and he brought all the characters or all the actors' comic books, and Singer had a fit and threw them out and said, "Don't read this, and I don't want you," and just a big fu to like the fandom, and and they slowly, but and then the to me the craziest, goofiest thing you could have ever put on in a movie prior to MODOK would have been like a realistic version of Captain America with that outfit, right? How do you make that not look corny? And they did. And I mean, my God, they pulled Captain off, and then the next thing you know, they're just doing Doctor Strange with yellow gloves and like just so on and so forth. And then we have the Guardians, and we have a talking raccoon and Groot. I mean, Rocket.
And that it's related to The Last of Us, because I think that there's a lot of ego, I think, that goes into anything artistic. And I think it's actually harder for creators to actually listen to the fans, or because everyone's so caught up in, I want to bring my vision, so I feel like Singer is more like, fuck the comics, this is my vision, and that's where I'm a little worried about with what's his name.
It's not yours.
Yeah, but I'm a little worried about with what's his name? You know what I'm talking about, Kev, I
Tim
think.
Gunn.
James Gunn.
Yeah,
I
James
think
Gunn. Sorry, it's Tim
James Gunn.
Gunn's from
Yeah, the cookie
Project
guy.
Runway.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, James Gunn, I think he's one of those dudes who's more about this is my vision, you know, like fuck your vision in a way. It's like, no, I want this. This is you are taking modern day mythology, okay? This is for the people, you know, and The Last of Us is like video games, period, are modern day mythology in that medium. So The Last of Us being able to like, and when they do something different, they do it to serve the plot and world building, like episode 3. But they also show that like it takes a certain level of humility to say we're going to do this to serve the game and the story. So it's like I think that should be celebrated. I don't think we should take it for granted because it's so fucking rare.
Well, now you have an actual like gamer fan, knows the game inside out, knows the story inside out. And that was where it did justice, because this gentleman over here loved what they did and it added to the story without taking anything away. It wasn't, it wasn't subtraction by addition, it didn't take anything away. It added the continuation without disrespecting anything. These directors, when you have stories and characters that are almost a century old.
Yeah.
My friend, it is not yours. It is a collectively part of the culture. It is not, no, like.
And that's what Rian Johnson did. That's what Rian Johnson did with Last Jedi. Subvert expectations, you know. It was just like his head so far up his ass, and we're not going to go into a rant mode, but I just had to say, like, he's an example of that, you know, of not really, because when the actor.
Who's Rian Johnson? He's the guy that does Knives Out,
exactly.
right?
Let's not even like, yeah. But like when
I've never
Hamill,
I've erased the trilogy out of my
Mark
head.
Hamill is legitimately beefing with you, and you're like, "Fuck you! I don't care. I'm the one in charge." I mean, that to me is a blasphemy. It's sacrilege.
It's like, just ego, like you said. Yeah. It's so ego, and it's like nobody cares, bro.
Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's people aren't coming to see a Zack Snyder film, although a lot of people did. They want to see the Justice League. They want to see the Batman. They want to see Superman. They want to see these characters that are who they are for a reason. And that's what makes it crazy that Captain America works so well. But as much as I actually don't hate Man of Steel, that wasn't Superman. Like, that was a different
100%. I agree with you. That wasn't any. I've always talked to this. Superman, and I'm not a massive DC guy. I love certain DCs. I got tons of Batman books, and I love Superman. I love Superman for the same reasons I love Cap. Superman to me is not defined by his powers. Everybody has powers in the DC universe. What makes Superman Superman is his moral compass, which he gained from his parents and his upbringing. Superman is a moral compass that's untouchable. When Superman starts killing people in film, that's not Kal-El. That's, I don't know who that is. That ain't Superman. That's some other random dude.
Yeah.
And, you did not have to break Zod's neck. There could have been 1,000 ways you could have written that to defeat him. You did not have to pound a dude through concrete.
Yes.
Because he, like, just all of that just made me like, I was like that scene in Mallrats where the kids see the Easter Bunny get beat up. I was like, oh, like, no, you've literally just destroyed all of this. Like, oh my God, I'd rather see Kevin Smith do these movies.
Right. Yeah. And the way he mercilessly levels Metropolis, I realize that set up the Batman and that set up all that stuff. But like, the only time you've ever seen Superman really do big damage to Metropolis in the comics was the death of Superman. And that was him against Doomsday. Because when they were punching each other, it was like atomic blast. Like, they were hitting each other so hard that it, like, the shockwaves were destroying stuff, right? Like,
that wasn't malicious. That wasn't any malicious intent. That was all a result of him trying to save people.
Yeah.
This Man of Steel had, I'm not going to say malintent, but could care less how that dude was going to go through the wall, and could care because he dared go near Lois Lane. And he could care less, ultimately, like, there's 1,000 ways he could have, through a moral compass, taken care of Zod.
And why wouldn't he just jump in, take Lois out, and then go take he's faster than everybody. He could do everything.
I mean, there's so many. It was just, even Batman with guns is annoying.
Yeah.
I've read a lot of the 1930s Batman that had, when he had a gun, and it was interesting. It was crazy, but I'd like again, when you have Batman with guns, that makes you like me. Like, no, I could have a gun and go take dudes out.
Now,
like,
Cap had so one thing I will say though is Cap definitely kills people. Like I think that like when you watch the movies, like
I don't disagree.
Yeah.
But it's not, Superman's a different
Yes, he's a different level.
thing, and it's apple pie, and it's different. DC, everything about Marvel is, the difference about Marvel is superheroes are as human as us, within their flaws.
They're not God.
Tony Stark is
deeply flawed.
He is a alcoholic, womanizing, terrible by all accounts from a moral standpoint person. Everybody has mad problems, including Cap. Cap is, Ant-Man is a guy who in the comics beat his wife because he was so self-conscious and had such little he became Hank Pym in the comics. Always felt like he was worthless as an Ant-Man, and then he became Giant Man, and then he felt he couldn't control that, and then in the comics that's how he becomes Yellow Jacket, because he hates himself and he has all these problems, and the Pym particles cause him, which they kind of touch that in the movie. The Pym particles create mental issues for him, and he becomes a Yellow Jacket, in which case he becomes not a villain but a jerk, like the highest level, like, jerk. And he's like, I killed Ant-Man and I killed Giant Man. And they're like, who is this guy who killed? They didn't know it was Hank. And then he grabs like Janet and he's like manhandling her. And then at one point when he got kicked out of the Avengers, was because in the comic he smacks her right across the face and beats Janet right in the panels. And they did that specifically to show like he was out of control, and he gets kicked out of the Avengers.
Yeah, and that's always, I mean, we've talked about it, like when and Marvel is a very human level thing. They've gone bigger, but like when you're doing DC, it's really hard to start with your main characters, because Superman and Wonder Woman are effectively gods. Like it's hard to bring them down to a human
better
level.
Than us in every way.
Yes, and it's really, really hard. And Superman especially has one of my favorite characters. I've told you guys before, I have an autographed Death of Superman autographed by Siegel and Schuster. Like, and like I love Superman, but like his evolution has been ridiculous. Like when he started, he was bulletproof. He could jump really high. He couldn't even fly when he started. He could jump really high, and he was super strong, and that was about it. And like, and at some point in the comics, like he sneezed and destroyed a solar system. Like, like his power set's gone nuts.
There's moments where he's been super OP, and they've had to dial it back for the sake of where do you go, I always love Superman. I love Kal-El. I love everything he's been about. And to me, his moral compass was his human side is what made him super, not him being an alien, the way he was raised. And again, Batman, the same.
I feel like after Chris Reeves' Superman,
that's the perfect Superman.
What's that?
To me, that's the perfect Superman.
Yeah, he was fantastic. And I think the only places that I've seen it done well, I think Smallville actually did a really good job. Although I think Smallville, and we've talked about this too, I think Smallville did a better job with Lex Luthor than anything else. The Lex Luthor in Smallville is one of the best like character arcs like ever. He went from a guy trying really hard.
WB has always done better than the movies since since Batman, the first Batman, not Batman Returns, but DC's last great, outside of Nolan, DC's last great era, it was Batman.
Yeah.
And not knocking DC, just it was what it was. It is what it is. That was their last great thing. But Warner WB has put out the best DC content for
Oh my
people.
God, this
Flash to
brings
the
me.
Arrow.
Okay, so what are your thoughts on this Flash film coming out? Like
the meme says, boy, Michael Keaton can really make you forget that Ezra Miller's a big piece of shit in like 1 second.
Yeah.
I think Flashpoint is, if people don't understand what Flashpoint is and what it means, they better be ready, because this is the most luckiest thing, because I think this was already in development before Gunn. This is Gunn's moment, that because Flashpoint in the comics, it's gonna have the ability to stop and erase everything. I think it's perfect. I want to see a new DC EU that's more cohesive and makes sense. Like letting The Rock, I love Dwayne Johnson, but letting The Rock do what the hell he wants with the Black Adam. Who are you? You're not going to go. First of all, Black Adam is not important without Shazam.
Yeah.
Not saying that he's not bigger in the whole grand scheme of things, but that's Shazam's number one rogue. Like you can't, he can fight Superman, he can do all those things, but there has to be a little order for some sake of like DC fandom, and just having him. And then what is up with trying to make every villain a goddamn anti-hero? Like Sony, I'm looking at you.
Oh God, it's just everything they're making, like they're doing Craven right now. Like who gives a shit about Craven?
Well, Craven's a great villain, but he's ancillary. He has to be with Spider-Man, he's
not even Craven. He is an animal activist in this one. Like they're doing some crazy shit with it. I'm like,
I don't see. That's the thing. If that is true and that's actually a thing, that is the most insane. Like, no, Kevin Feige needs to go with a fucking match and burn down Sony's studios. Like, because like his whole thing is about slaughtering animals. Like he's a hunter, Craven the Hunter, and his which is, mind you, if you're a comic book reader and you want to read a great story arc, Craven's Last Hunt is one of the most absolutely amazing story arcs you'll ever read in comics. Which is him, and I won't give anything away, but he's caught everything in the world, and it's just his last attempt to get Spider-Man, which is his greatest trophy he ever wants.
Yep.
You know, him and his brother, who's the chameleon.
Yeah, I remember I think when that was out was right when I was starting to collect comic books. Like I just started to get into them then, and I remember there was some stuff around that. I think not too long after I got into comic books, Todd McFarlane took over Spider-Man.
Yep. So
I have an autographed first edition of McFarlane's Spider-Man run.
Nice. Issue 300, Spider-Man 300 with the black McFarlane suit was.
Yeah. I have his first appearance of Carnage somewhere too.
Oh wow. Cletus.
Yeah. And but yeah, I know I look at Sony, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, because the Venom movies aren't very good. Morbius was heinous. It's oof.
Yeah, I mean, Morbius doesn't need a movie. Like, he's a great character that you can add in, but like, I mean, it's just Sony's attempt to, like, if Sony was smart, they would run with a live action. If I was running Sony, I would do Spider-Verse 2. And at the end of Spider-Verse 2, I would make it go into a live action film. Like the last act or something, and do something that would blow everybody's minds, and then take Miles into live action from then on and run with that. You don't need Peter Parker. Miles Morales is as damn near as popular as Peter Parker, and you don't need Tom Holland, and you can have them interact at some point.
Yeah.
You know, you can cross them over as long as you let Kevin run it. But like, Sony just shut up and take
Yeah,
the
that's
money.
just my thing. Is
Shut up and take your
I'm-
money.
Exactly. Like if they just split, like if they just intelligently split their profits with Marvel and just said, you know what, you guys, we get our money because we own the characters, but you guys tell your stories and integrate them in.
It's all but confirmed from the sources that I read. It's all but confirmed that Tom's new contract is for 3 more movies and then 2 more appearances or 3 more appearances in other films. One of them being a half and half film, which I personally think is going to be
Miles.
No.
Oh.
I think the half and half film is going to be, and it could be wrong, but his like number one, like kind of like, and not Deadpool. That's more of a modern thing, which could be, because in the comics now, Deadpool and Spidey are inseparable, and they have a whole title together, Deadpool and Spider-Man. But classically, what would be the Human Torch and Spider-Man were like frenemies. They were jealous of each other because they were teenage kids. They hated each other, but yet they were buddies, and they had the best. They were together in Marvel Team Up for years. They did so many comics together. It was called Marvel Team Up. I think that might be a possibility. But so the plan, from what I've kind of heard through the rumor mill and some of the sources that I get from like Mikey Sutton and a couple of these other guys, My Time to Shine, their Twitter, and then Mikey Sutton, Mikey Sutton is an insider who is most of the time always correct. And I think I'm not sure what he does, but I think in my brain that he works for Marvel, not studios, but Marvel Comics.
Yeah.
And because he always knows when characters are being used, because Marvel Studios has to put a hold check on a character, that's so they don't license anything for that character.
Okay.
And he always knows the holds 2 years in advance. Like he knows he'll 2 years ago he was like, yeah, Marvel just put a hold on Man Thing and Werewolf by Night, stuff like that he'll release, and then you'll forget about it. You're like, holy shit, Mike, he was right. So anyway, the next trilogy is, from what I've heard, the rumor mill, take with a grain of salt, is the next trilogy, and it makes sense to me, is going to be Tom Holland Spider-Man as a college student.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the third trilogy will be him as an adult, with the drama that comes with marriage to MJ, or
that's like
whatever
six more movies.
Yeah. So right now there's a contract that's with 3 plus 2 other appearances, and one of them may be a Sony film or something, part of it. But for Marvel Studios 3, he is going to be, from also what I've heard, is he's going to be the
leader
protagonist kind of in Kang Dynasty. He's going to be, of course, everybody's going to be in there, but he's going to be, he will be the highest paid in going into that.
Makes sense.
It does make sense because he's a big deal now.
So he's the Tony Stark of the
situation. Exactly. There was a lot of talk when you knew Downey was out that they wanted Spider-Man to be the new Tony, which is interesting that they kind of de-leveled him as much as they did at the end of No Way Home, because he doesn't have any Stark tech. He doesn't have anything. So
I love that, and I love him going to the original suit. Yeah,
and now he's what it sets up too is it sets up how smart Peter Parker is. Like, they've talked about him going to MIT, but he's leaned on Tony for so much of his stuff in the previous films that you haven't had to see just how smart he was. And that's the one thing the older films did, is that like he was really smart. He was creating all his own stuff.
It's a soft reboot of the character in a way, without taking away what they've done. It's getting him back to where they wanted him. And we're going to have this trilogy that's going to be way more grounded until we hit, like, and again, kind of just like reading Spider-Man, where you'll read him for a year of being grounded, and then he'll get involved in some crazy Avengers thing. And then we'll go back to Queens, busting the Lizard. So that's how it's going to play out. And I would love to see the adult Peter Parker. And then at a certain point, you can retire him, you can kill him, you can do some, crazy interesting thing because it's time to bring Miles in. You could pass the torch to Miles. I love Miles Morales. I think, the Ultimate Universe was really interesting. Their whole attempt when Marvel did the Ultimate Universe, and you sound familiar with the Kev, was an attempt to reboot things and bring in a little bit more representation, with Nick Fury, and Miles being Puerto Rican and black, like getting that mixed race thing going on with him. And I love, unfortunately, I never really got into Ultimate outside of Miles. Didn't do it for me. Wasn't bad, just didn't do it for me. It didn't last. And then when they did the Spider-Verse, they brought Miles into the 616, kind of like Miles and Nick Fury came in, and that was pretty much all they kept from that universe. Nick Fury ended up, they retconned his story to be Nick Fury Jr., so he's actually the son of the original Nick Fury from 616, so they could have them both coexist, which was brilliant. Having representation is a big thing. I think it's important. I think it's important for ticket sales, movies, all kinds of reasons. But one thing that drives me nuts is this is a message to people that have issues with this. Nobody cares. Get over it. When people race swap, gender swap, who fucking cares? As long as the actor's good and the story's good, it's still the essence. I saw everybody bitching about the Wonder Man. Okay, first of all, 90% of these people complaining about Wonder Man don't know who the fuck Simon Williams is. They're just upset because, and I can never say his name.
I'm talking about shit.
Hanawati, is it?
He was in Candyman. I know you're talking about.
Yeah, he's fucking stellar. Oh, by the way, Candyman's one of the greatest fucking.
I haven't seen those either.
Oh my god. Okay.
Yeah, and I've definitely meant to do those. Like I showed the guys, I have a huge list, and Candyman is definitely on there.
Fucking brilliant actor. He's gonna be a great Simon Williams, and I'm excited because now we're gonna get the Grim Reaper, who's Simon's brother, and all these different things, and he's a great villain. All these things. Who fucking cares? The only character that they switched out that I had any problem with, and it had nothing to do with the fact that it was a gender swap, because everybody was so upset about Taskmaster being a female. That wasn't my issue. I don't give a fuck.
Yeah, Abdul Mateen. Keep going.
Yeah, Abdul. Yeah. Taskmaster is a very outside. I mean, because the look of Taskmaster was spot on killer for a real world application to that character.
Yeah.
The adjustments they made with the downloading, it's brilliant. My problem with Taskmaster is Taskmaster from a character standpoint. For me, what I love about Taskmaster is he's funny and witty like Deadpool. He's always cracking jokes. He's smart. He's like crazy. I wish she would have been. I wish they wouldn't have muted her like
you
like
basically they Baraka pooled like Taskmaster, because remember Deadpool in Wolverine Origins was muted and just like looked like Baraka.
They muted. They did the same thing to Taskmaster, and it kind of like threw the character off for me. Now I'm not saying they can't retcon, because it's another thing, not retcon, but change up. Because again, Kevin Feige, like the great thing about Marvel is you can fucking throw complaints in the complaint box in the internet Twitter world, and that motherfucker will listen and change shit, because he fixed everything that I've ever had issues with. You've had some sort of retcon to explain something, or look, the Mandarin. I mean, like, I hated Iron Man 3. And I loved how they played the Mandarin for what they could do for the Mandarin as a character that has a lot of like cultural issues from reading it.
But like, not only that, but to retcon it the way they did. So he, like, the guy that sucked in Iron Man 3 is still in Shang-Chi in a fucking brilliant role. He's so great.
Trevor Slattery is a great character now. Like he went from like, oh god damn it, to like, oh, I love this guy now.
Yeah.
And I loved Wenwu. I was okay with they killed him. I mean, I like to see villains go on, but my favorite villain right now, Kang's amazing. We'll see what Kang can do, but man, I want more Daniel Bruhl. I want more Zemo, and I think it's gonna happen in Thunderbolts because Bruhl's fucking genius, and
He's
Zemo's
so
one of my
good.
favorite. Zemo's so dope. Like, if you ever watch, also too, my favorite animated cartoon, which I watch them all, but my favorite, probably most rewatched cartoon of all of them, as much as I love X-Men, is Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Heroes. I've watched that series 10 times, and Zemo, and it's fucking great. I love Zemo.
Yeah, Zemo's dope. And Daniel Bruhl is fantastic. He did a show, I think they've done 2 seasons of it. It's called The Alienist over on
Okay, I have
TNT.
never seen it. Yeah.
It's a trip. It's basically like one of the first, like, not quite CSI, but that idea of like investigative detective work. And they called it an alias because they did some psychoanalyzing. They looked at the scenes. They did all the stuff that people weren't doing at the time. With Dakota, maybe it actually is Dakota Fanning, I think,
Okay.
in it, and then Luke Evans. So like, it's
Okay,
a
cool.
really good cast, but Daniel Bruhl is absolutely fantastic in it. But yeah, I'm excited to see more of that. I think
He'll be back. They haven't announced him yet, but Zemo put together the Thunderbolts. He's gonna show up in that. He's not. The last we saw is he went off to the raft. Something's gonna happen. I bet we see him and Abomination in the Thunderbolts.
Yeah, what do you think? So here's a little bit of speculation, but what do you think of Harrison Ford coming in, taking over for what's his
Ross.
face? Yeah,
Thunderbolt Ross.
taking over
William
as
Hurt.
Ross.
William Hurt, yeah.
Yeah, I believe, there you go.
Perfect. It's one of those cast changes that is not going to be noticeable. It's not like you're switching out Tony Stark.
Yeah.
Which they've done 3 times. Howard Stark, right?
Yeah.
And Luke Evans was one of them. Funny,
yeah.
you mentioned them. Keep going, sorry.
I think it's brilliant, and ultimately, it's all going to be motion capture anyway, because if you know, which it's not a secret, Thunderbolt Ross turns into the Red Hulk. His obsession with the Hulk leads him to take his own version of the super soldier serum, and it goes terribly wrong, like it always does. And he'll become the Red Hulk, which everybody wants. I want it. And he'll be motion capture with a big ass mustache, probably, and Hulk with a mustache. That's Thunderbolt. You know, that's the Red Hulk. At least part of some of his way he was drawn, but yeah, and they'll just voice him. And honestly, with those new voice technology things, 5 years ago, I was like, somebody better get James Earl Jones's voice, every word in the fucking, so we can have Vader forever. And now it's like
they can do it.
Now we have Vader forever, and James can stay home.
But anybody, like, they can do anybody's voice with these AIs. Like, so, like, as far as that, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation of.
Well, and didn't James Earl Jones like sign over the rights to his voice, basically?
Yeah.
Like, he's like, so he's like, yeah, you guys can pay me and just use it. Cool. You know?
Yeah. I need
crazy.
Vader in my life till I die. So
yeah.
We were talking about villains. Speaking of pop culture, we were talking about villains the other day, and I was talking about how 90% of villains we all like, even though they're villains, right? Like Vader, we all love Vader. We want more of Vader. Even villains are typically written some sort of sympathetic way, right? And we were watching a movie the other night, and I was like, man, this is one of the best movie villains ever. And I have not 1 ounce of sympathy for him. And he's just, you hate him. I love the portrayal of him, but he's so villainous. And even though he has sympathetic qualities to his character, he's so villainous. And I was like, this is one of the best villains ever. And it was Bishop from Juice.
Okay. Yes. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I've seen a movie maybe 2 or 3 times, but it was a long time ago. And I think that every time I watch it, I'll appreciate it more. But basically, I know he gets seduced by the power of a gun. Basically, he goes crazy. And it was somewhat prophetic, I guess, in a way, in terms of how Pac kind of went off the deep end after the shooting at Quad Studios and then joining Death Row and everything. And, all that.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, definitely a little bit. He turned into a little Bishop post, post prison. But are you, Kevin, you familiar with Juice? Have you seen Juice?
I don't think so.
Juice is just a 90s pseudo hip hop movie because, it was that based around hip hop culture. It was about a DJ and his friends, and it was one of the greatest villain performances I've ever seen. We just rewatched it and it held up so well.
He had this obsession with James Cagney, right? King of the World.
He was obsessed with White Heat, James Cagney and White Heat. And there's a whole scene in the movie with that. And it was, in my opinion, Pac's greatest moment, actor wise, and first role, and I think his best role. He was good overall, but and it was an Ernest Dickerson film. Yeah, Ernest is a very underrated
with a phenomenal soundtrack.
Known as a cinematographer, because if I'm not correct, Ernest Dickerson was basically the DP and cinematographer for everything Spike Lee.
Yeah, exactly. That was his first, I think it might have been his directorial debut.
Yeah, we were taken. I went to see that movie. Our basketball coach took us to go. A bunch of us took us to go see it.
That is a cool basketball coach.
Need to see this because we were city kids and we were like, you got to see,
balls dangers.
What, don't
do that.
About friendship and don't do this shit.
Yeah, 4 friends who fell apart over some crazy stuff.
The dumbest stuff. It's such a good movie. Kev, you got to check it out. You'll appreciate it.
Look for it.
Ernest Dickerson. It's shot well. Music soundtrack is amazing. Cue.
I mean, between Know the Ledge, and this is actually a good segue really quick. I know that we're hitting that 2-hour mark, but I want to make sure that we hit another side of the prism. That is, we haven't even said this name on the show yet, but for the Chicagoans, you guys do know the name DJ Risky Business. So DJ Risky Business is known in the hip hop community. And Juice obviously is a hip hop soundtrack. So Know the Ledge by Eric B. and Rakim. Enough Respect, that was Big Daddy Kane. Yes, I'm showing my cred here. And then my personal favorite, it's a song called Don't Be Afraid. It's a New Jack Swing track by Aaron Hall from the group Guy. But can you talk a little bit about like your DJ history and your role in Chicago hip hop, and maybe even like the film that you guys worked on?
Okay, so one of the things that I did to, again, stay out of trouble, a lot of friends growing up, got into hip hop young, loved hip hop. Some of the first records I got were like Houdini and Run DMC, and super embraced the culture. And it was all around me. It was everywhere. And breakers to graffiti kids. And I wasn't a graph kid. But I taught myself, I became obsessed with the music. And the first thing I did before I got turntables was I started making mixtapes by recording songs off the radio. And then I would record 4 or 5 songs, and then I would open up the cassette tape with the little mini screwdriver. Then I'd take a razor blade and cut parts of the songs, and then use Scotch tape and tape it together, and then make my own edits, just cutting and pasting like a producer would at the studio with 4-inch reel. I didn't know that's what I was doing. I just figured out how to do that because my brother showed me how to fix a broken cassette tape. So I was like, oh, I'll do this. And then I sounded cool when I did certain things and started doing that. Then I graduated to turntables, and then started becoming a mix DJ. Started doing parties, getting better. And I ended up doing a lot of mixtapes, and I did the ones I'm probably most known for as the Uncommon Classic Common mixes I did. And I did a mixtape with Mos Def and Talib Kweli, and MOP mix with DJ Pizzo of hiphopsite.com, and did a lot of Chicago mixes, and then I DJ'd for a rapper named Juice and did a mixtape for him called 100% Juice, which that got a lot of love because Juice was one of the top freestyle battle MCs in the world. His most notable moments were the 97 Scribble Jam when he beat Eminem in the 97 Scribble Jam, and then M always notates him and Rhymefest, another buddy of mine, for being big influences on him. So they've always kind of been thanked in the credits and everything. So M blowing up kind of helped everybody know who some of our local legends were. I did a mixtape with M2 called The Shadiest. It was with M's DJ Head, who was a friend of mine out of Detroit, and I would go up to Detroit and stay with those guys. That's where I ended up meeting like Dilla and a lot of the Detroit people. Rest in peace, JD. Wasn't Dilla then, he was JD. He gave me Slum Village Fantastic Volume 1 on a test pressing vinyl back then. DJ House Shoes and all the just dope talent coming out of Detroit. And because it was close to Chicago, we would just kind of travel back and forth.
Midwest.
And then I did a mixtape because it was right before M got signed. Head was like, "Hey, can you help, move this thing we're doing? Here's a bunch of songs, and I love the mixtapes you're doing. Here's a bunch of songs, demos we're working on. Put them on a mix, get them out there, press them on cassette back then." And I did. So my mixtape, The Shadiest, still has probably like 5 or 6 songs that are original demo versions of songs that ended up coming out on the first album on Aftermath, but are different beats because they're the original demos. To this day, have never been outside of my mix. I don't think they've ever shown up on anything, which is, I guess, kind of cool.
Nice.
Yeah. So I was initially too asked to redo the scratches on Just the Two of Us.
Oh, the Will Smith song?
No.
Oh.
The Eminem song
Oh,
from
my
the Slim
bad.
Shady EP where it's like
Yeah.
Just the Two of Us. And DJ Lynn Swan did those scratches, and I'm a fan of Lynn Swan. I didn't want to touch them because Head was like, "I want you to do something different." Maybe it was a remix or something, but he wanted me to lay scratches for something else, and I'm like, "Oh man!" And I think Lynn Swan is amazing, so I thought the cuts were fine, so I was like, "I don't want to touch that." I never did it. At the time, M wasn't really nobody; he wasn't signed yet or anything, so I was gonna do a favor for my buddy. But I was such a fan of Lynn Swan, and I was kind of like avoiding even doing that. But again, I had no clue who M was gonna be. Nobody knew any of that. Couldn't even fathom the concept of that. So anyway, that's a little bit of the backstory. I ended up doing all these mixtapes. Got known for Juice. DJ'd for rapper EC Illa. Worked with EC Illa, who's another Chicago legend. Who, by the way, has a book coming out this week, which is amazing, called Throwing Stars and Fat Laces. Check it out. And then a rapper named Mike One, and we toured a lot together. And through Mike and other people, I've done shows and either DJ'd for or with everyone from KRS-One, Rakim, Mobb Deep, Jizza, Busta Rhymes, Snoop. We had George Clinton on a remix to one of our albums. Did everything. I've done rock mixes. I did a New Jack Swing mix with our friend here, got to help me out and host, which I was very thankful for that. Which a lot of people still love that tape.
Awesome.
And yeah, that was it. And then I've just been DJing in clubs in Chicago for years, and now because of hip hop, I DJ for a living, and I get to be a kid and play with toys and read comics and watch movies.
Shoot photography, which is basically again, Excelsior 1975.
Excelsior 1975. I get to do all these things because of music and DJing, but I'm only a DJ because of hip hop. It wasn't rock or pop music that made me want to become a DJ. It was hip hop. So I owe a lot to hip hop, and how I want to pay hip hop back, specifically Chicago hip hop, is for the last 6 years, me and our squad. I'm one of the producers with the director Ryan Brockmeyer and one of my DJ partners Sean Doe, and a handful of other producers. We're working on a film called Midway: The Story of Chicago Hip Hop, and it is the whole history of Chicago hip hop's culture, not just the music, the culture. So we cover the dance aspect of it, we cover the fashion aspect of it, we cover everything from going far back as Soul Train.
That's right, Don Cornelius.
To the early radio stations, to early DJs with house music, to Shabba-Doo, who grew up in Cabrini, who's most famous as Ozone in Breakin', and him going out west with Soul Train and bringing some of that flavor out there. And we cover everything all the way up to Common and Kanye and Chance and everything here, that the whole culture, all the graffiti artists, everything. So I'm really proud of that, and I want to be able to tell the story as much as possible and tell all the unknown stories to, at the very least, give back to what this has given me culture wise. Everything is about the culture, as they say, and I know that's kind of cliche, and people always say, oh, the culture, which was funny because it was kind of cringy a little bit whenever I heard Jonah saying it in You People.
Oh, in You People. Yes.
The culture. Because I'm like, sounds cringy. Is that how I sound when I say these things?
But you know what though? I'm okay with the nebulous thing, because the thing is, like, we know that hip hop kind of, I even use the term urban because I think that we know kind of like where it came from, kind of like the roots of it, but we don't want it to be like exclusionary. It's still a one nation under a groove thing. And it actually reminds me, I thought it was notable that the NAACP Awards just happened tonight, and the person who won for Best Supporting Actor was, I'm gonna butcher his name, but I think it's Tenoch Huerta, the guy who played
Huerta, yeah, Namor.
Yeah, Namor at the NAACP award. This is a black show, but they gave the award to a Mexican dude. Like, so to me, it's like, I think that, the culture, or black culture, whatever you want to call it, has always been inclusive. Like, it's like, if you're down with us, it's not about skin color, it's just about whatever. So that's why I like the culture, because we know what it is, but we're calling it the culture because it's not,
for sure.
Right?
I've always carried myself in a way to respect, because I've always felt it is American history as a strong history and ability and tendency to, an American, and I not just white people, have a tendency to steal cultural things, and everybody should be happy about everybody using stuff, but when things are taken and credit's not there, it does hurt people.
Yes.
And inevitably the people that start anything are going to be the ones left on the monetarily outside looking in. Black men and women are making a shit ton of money in hip hop, but the people that started it, who happen to be black, they're broke, so it and of course the industry, which isn't really black owned, is making a ton of money.
Yeah. Even more
too, as well. I don't want to leave that out. Everybody, it's all set up like that. I definitely feel like I carry myself like a guest, so to speak, even though as far as Chicago hip hop, I've been in it for a long time. And I feel like I've offered a lot to it, to my part, to where I've earned my position. It's not for me to say. I'm thankful when other people let me and accept me and feel that way. I just always like to have the respect, as I'm a guest in this other culture, so to speak, and I try to represent it well. So I'm very, again, it's very important to me working on this film that if it does happen to make money, it's a documentary film, so I'm not delusional. I'm not expecting it. I'm not expecting nobody to get rich off of it. Great if we can make money. But a healthy percentage of profits, we've all agreed, are going to go back to Chicago hip hop community somehow. Like, so there's a big percentage, like, I don't want the money. I want to be paid for what I did effort wise and what I put into it. But as far as just steady making profit off of the people telling stories of the sweat they did, I can make money DJing. I don't need to take that little bit of money, whatever it's going to be. We're not, again. And if we do make a lot of money in a deal or something, people are really interested, then that's just more money for us to be able to put back into social programs back into the city.
Well, that's what's up, man.
Yeah. Yep. Very adamant about that. I feel that I eat every day and live the life I live because of the culture of the people that I grew up with that allowed me to do this, and they allowed me to thrive, and they allowed me to grow as an artist. And I was allowed to go to parties that were welcoming to hip hop people, but definitely were like a lot of people probably wouldn't go to unless they were part of that community.
Sure.
And it saved our lives, so to speak, because we kept out of trouble and kept out of gang stuff and drug stuff and whatever trappings come with the city of Chicago.
Yeah.
And again, the city is, I owe a lot to the city, so I want to give back as much as possible. And this is one way we can do it.
Well, I hope when we drop this episode on Wednesday, and I hope you don't mind if I tag you on the Facebooks, maybe those friends of yours who are Chicago people will feel that love and feel that authenticity and that dedication and support to, just representing the city. I mean,
yeah,
it's like it's not even words, it's also actions. Like, I'm looking back at your, it's so funny. I saw Diddy in concert actually at Webster Hall in New York, and it's so dope when I see people represent their city. He actually has New York kind of like in the font of the New Yorker on both forearms. So the fact that you've got like Chicago, the flag and the logo, it's just, I don't know, there's something about representing where you're from.
Our flag.
It's just, it's dope. I respect it. It just,
my wall is all Chicago artists, from rock to blues to rap to house.
Yeah.
I mean, it made me and I feel a type of way about it. I'm not like, and I don't have I don't feel I guess xenophobic, is that the
Sure,
word?
yeah.
About either. I don't think that our city's better than anybody else. I just wouldn't leave it. As cold as we get, as as whatever people say problems, I personally think the city's safer than it's ever been. I think the media has the world thinking that we're some sort of war zone. I think the city's safer than it's ever been.
Words like Chirac, and I'm beaming here because it's also like I've had so many kind of like eras, if you so to speak, like whether it's the Canadian crew or the California crew, and now people get to see the Chicago vibe that, like, because I was only there for like 5 years, but it is kind of like when I go back, I feel like I'm gonna be there for a week in May, just for your wedding, by the way. So like, I'm looking forward to that. I also am very kind of always aware of like what's happening around me. So I'm looking at my boy Kev, and he hasn't really said a lot like in the last couple of minutes. I just want to make sure you get a chance to like,
I'm sorry. I'm like, I ran off.
We were just vibing.
And to be fair, like, the intention of this episode, I talked to Andrew about a few times, was to have you on and let you go off. Like,
I appreciate it. Thank you.
We talk about pop culture a lot and all that. I don't feel like I'm a particularly interesting individual. So to have somebody on who has been through some shit and done some stuff and done all stuff. That's interesting to me. The things that you know are interesting to me, and I'm really hoping that when this episode drops, it's a little different than other episodes we've done, but at the same time, there's a lot of history, there's a lot of information, there's a lot of cool stuff here that I think that I actually think the people that do enjoy the show a lot are really gonna dig. I think this is a really cool episode. I'm already thinking about the text message I'm going to send Andrew when we're done about how fucking great this episode went. So, like, by all means, monopolize the time however you want, and we're kind of at the 2 hour mark, so we are nearing the end. But I hope we have you on again, because I think there's
whenever you guys want me to rap, and we can just I've talked about myself, so next time I come on, I can just come on as a participant in whatever subject matter we're going into.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm just gonna say, like, straight up, like, and this is more of a breadcrumb than anything else. Like, are you a Star Trek fan, Chad, or not really?
Am not. I don't dislike it or hate it or any. I'm not like because I'm such a Star Wars dork. I'm not like, oh, there's only so much content you can take in certain ways.
Yeah, you got to be
It's
picky.
true.
It's so true.
I've seen the show a million times. The TV show is great.
Mhm.
And I've seen the first movies. Where I stopped was Next Generation forward is where I have no.
So, like, the Picard stuff, not
the
so
Picard
much.
era, and it seems awesome, and maybe I'll jump into it one day. It's a little overwhelming because there's so much, so it's like one of those things.
All right, let me tell you something. Okay, check this out. So I'll just fully admit, and I can lose people here. Like, I have not seen every episode of TNG, actually any of them. Like, basically, I watched like the viewer's guide to, like, the key episodes of TNG. So I've probably seen maybe like 20 episodes. Okay, but that's 20 episodes out of, like, what I think it's like 7 seasons. So, and each season is like 20 plus episodes.
Yeah, it was syndicated television at the time, so 20 episodes.
But I got enough of it to actually have an appreciation. So between that viewer's guide, and I did all that in preparation for Picard. Okay, now the reason why I got excited is because the Picard series, and of course Patrick Stewart, I didn't fall in love with dude until he played Professor X. So I'm not like, I had to go back because I was a Kirk guy. I was a Kirk guy for so long.
I mean,
until
cool.
I would, but when I saw Kirk and Picard in Generations again, like, my personality has changed. Like, I'm now more of Picard. So, like, Kirk is a lucky motherfucker. He's dope, and Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan is still like the fucking GOAT, but Picard's that motherfucking man. Anyway, so Picard season 1, this is like the new shit from, like, I want to say 2018 maybe. Is like
3 or 4 years,
yeah, it's like season 1 is cool. Season 2, I didn't even bother with that shit, okay? But I went back and watched it because season 3 just dropped last week. And let me tell you, we'll talk about it more in depth on the next show. I think, Kevin, we're on the same page. Dude,
yes, 100%.
Holy shit. Straight up. Okay,
Good
there's been a lot
television.
of Trek since First Contact in 96. There's been a lot of it. Like, there's been 2009, J.J. Abrams, there's been Discovery, there's been, like, Strange New Worlds. And I said straight up, after just the second episode of the 3rd season, I said, this is the best Trek we've had since 96. Like, fuck Abrams, dude. Like, I cannot wait till next Thursday. Like, they literally made like a movie and then chopped it in episodes. Like, that's awesome. How epic this shit is. So I said, so the next episode, guys, like next week, you're gonna hear about
we're not gonna be shutting up about that.
It's gonna be bad. It's gonna be bad.
I did like the Abrams movies. I thought they were cool, like for a revamp. And the dude who played Spock in that was my dream cast for Namor for like 10 years.
Oh, that's fair. I can see that. Yeah, for sure.
But I love Tanaka Huerta. He did better than I could imagine.
Dope. Like that movie was fantastic. You can talk about things in Phase 4. Wakanda Forever was incredible.
Incredible. And I kind of separate when people talk about what's your favorite movie, I separate Wakanda Forever completely, because like Endgame, because it had a mission and it couldn't stand alone on its own to do whatever it wanted. It had to follow something. It had to clean up a lot of like unfortunate mess, so to speak.
Yes, very much.
So it didn't. So I kind of can't judge it as I and it's amazing. So it's up there for an Endgame-y type thing for me. serious tone was amazing. Tanaka Huerta was amazing. I loved everything about it. I know Andrew, I was speculating for a year with Andrew what I thought. And I think what I speculated was pretty close. And it wasn't like hard to figure out. I didn't crack some code. I think they went pretty strong with the comics with Shuri and everything.
Yeah.
I was happy with that. People were I just did not want them to recast. I did not want them to bring back
I'm the same
Killmonger.
way. Yeah, I hated that
recast.
idea.
Don't make Killmonger, like, don't ruin the awesome villain he did by trying to make him an anti-hero.
The people who are like, you recasted Ross, why can't you recast T'Challa? Like, these motherfuckers, like, I swear to God, like,
so
if
different.
I see you and you say that shit, like, my respect is gone. Like, I mean, I'll still be cordial, but like, as far as like, you're an idiot, dude. Like, how are you gonna compare that shit? I'm sorry.
Culturally, T'Challa is a much greater, bigger character than Chadwick Boseman. I will say that.
Fair.
That's bigger. But Chadwick was family to these people. The MCU is not the 616. It is different. And again, especially now, you can bring in his son. You can still have a Black Panther, it was perfect.
Yes.
And the setup with Contessa, oh my God, Julia Louis-Dreyfus taking this rare side shield character and turning her into this brilliant,
conniving.
I mean,
yeah,
she's so awesome. I just love everything about her and Ross and that whole thing, and love Shuri, and I loved talk about Chicago connections.
That's right. I know, right?
Riri Williams.
Riri, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, as a comics expert, are the Rosses related? I've always wondered that. I could Google it, but are they related? As in, like, is it Thaddeus Ross?
Yeah, no.
Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, and then
Thunderbolt Ross and Everett Ross.
It's
not that I know of. It's just a name. But side note, shout out to Eve L. Ewing, who is one of the creators. She didn't invent or create, if I'm not correct, she didn't invent or create Ironheart. Ironheart and really was a student at MIT in Invincible Iron Man issue 4, side character. They took her, Eve L. Ewing, who was a Chicago girl. She went to Whitney Young. She currently is a professor at University of Chicago, but she still writes for Marvel. She went and fleshed out and created this whole story for Ironheart, and had her, a girl from Chicago who went to MIT, and she was a genius, and then she wrote from issue 1 of Ironheart on, and created the whole backstory. So hopefully we're going to see Riri in Chicago. I think that was the hint where she was like, you're going to come back to Chicago.
The flag's hanging in the door room.
You saw the flag and the Bulls thing. And I think that'll be really cool for the show. Riri's a really great character. And Tony Stark plays a major role. And I'm wondering if they're going to do that in some way, even with Robert Downey, because Ironheart's mentor is Tony through AI. So in the comic, it's an AI that mentors Riri. So Eve L. Ewing has now just taken over the newest run of Black Panther. So she's running Black Panther now, which is amazing. She's a brilliant fucking writer. She's an amazing woman. I follow her on Instagram. She's awesome. Yeah, so it's really cool, Chicago connection. And the main villain of the Ironheart show, there's two villains. It's gonna be the Hood, Parker Robbins, which is a really cool villain. He's a dude who gets demon possessed by a hood that's controlled by demons, whoever wears this. and I think he's the main antagonist, but kind of puppeted by the main guy, which is going to be Mephisto finally, who is cast, if I'm not correct, I think it's maybe official now, but it was cast by Sacha Baron Cohen as Mephisto.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So
right.
yeah, Mephisto and Sacha will make their appearance in Ironheart.
Finally.
That's awesome.
I
Yeah.
know it's super late, especially here in
I have to DJ in a private event tomorrow at like 11 a.m.
Oh
Jesus
I
Christ.
have to be there. Like I get up at 8, but I'm fine. I'm okay.
What can you break down in like 1 or 2 minutes really quickly, your theory or your about how to introduce the Fantastic Four? Because I remember you had an idea around it being a period piece in the 60s, and somehow I think it was something like that, right? Like fish out of water.
Yeah. So a couple years ago, I was trying to figure out, I had two theories on how you bring the X-Men in and how you bring the Fantastic Four in the MCU that makes sense of where were they and what happened without doing an overplayed out origin story again. And ironically, it came out very close to from what I understood Peyton Reed had done, that he wrote years and years and years ago, kind of similar. In my brain, I was like, a big plot point in the Fantastic Four comics is the negative zone. In the MCU, they have the quantum realm, which is the same. It's their version of the negative zone. And we may see the negative zone still. They couldn't use it 5 years ago when they come up with quantum because they didn't own it yet. So they came up with the quantum realm. So, anyway, my idea was that you do a period piece that takes place in the 60s so you can have the Fantastic Four and have all the glory of the corniness of them as superheroes. And because I mean they're very 60s corny, but in a good way. I love FF. They're the foundation of all of Marvel. First family. I say that you do a movie with them and it takes place in the 60s and you could have a goofy villain like Mole Man, something crazy. And again, there's no media, it's very, they're known, but it's not so insane that with social media, because the way the world is, it's the 60s. They have their adventure, they battle the Mole Man or whoever, and they get sucked into the quantum realm or negative zone at the end of the movie, and they're gone until they get brought back out, whether it's the quantum realm or something happened. That was my idea of how you could explain. And you could even have Doom, like at the end of it, they were fighting Doom, and everybody was gone, and that's why none of them are around, and they get brought back. That was my theory for that. My theory for the X-Men was similar to the origin of Blue Marvel, who's an amazing modern character. The X-Men live in the 60s. You could do a movie where it's the first 60s, 70s or something like that, and you could have the first team of the X-Men. Again, they're kind of in the shadows being superheroes, and they're run by Xavier. Or you don't even have to set it back then. You could set it right before. You could set it actually right before Iron Man, like where you have these superheroes that are kind of saving things and doing things in the shadows, so to speak. And they're this kids or whatever. Something happens, the world's not, they just decide the world is definitely not ready for mutants, and Xavier erases everyone's mind, similar to how they did with Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
And just basically
use a Cerebro to do it. Got it.
Use the Cerebro to make everybody forget that they're around, and they kind of go into hiding. And then that's the explanation. That was kind of my head idea. That was my, armchair script.
Thank you for doing that in less than 5 minutes. And we'll see if that actually happens, because if it does, then we can, as a show, claim that it was, it now.
You heard it here first.
Right.
That was where I was going with that shit right there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Guys, thank you for having me on. And
yeah, I think it's awesome. I think it was cool. Like I said, for me, There's a lot of information here that I didn't have. I definitely know squat about early hip hop, having grown up in little redneck towns and being a white kid in places where they, my hip hop was Sir Mix-a-Lot up in Seattle. So that's like as his hip hoppy as I got. And
Posse's on Broadway.
I play that all the time to this day.
Yeah, it was good stuff, but it was like this subset of this universe.
Were you out of the Seattle area? Was that?
I lived about 30 minutes south of Seattle, so I lived in a little town called Kent.
By the way, at the same time, me being a hip hop DJ, I was also obsessed with rock and new wave. I'm a big Depeche Mode junkie and all of that, and new wave is an insane part of my life. But I will say, just a side note, because I will go off on all these tangents, my favorite probably rock band of all time is Alice in Chains. I think Alice in Chains has the greatest rock harmonies since Paul and John.
Oh, wow.
They're pretty good. I think in my playlist I've got Rooster and Man in the Box in my playlist. So they're pretty dope. So cool. Well, I think we can call this one. Say it's been awesome. Like I said, I think it's been really fantastic, really educational for me. I know, Andrew, you probably heard some of these stories before, so it's not all brand new. But it was nice to get some real hardcore pop culture insight also. And I really will have to figure out when the right time to have you back on is, because I think it'll be really awesome. I think it'll be really cool. Our dream idea was to actually have you last week when we were talking about Ant-Man, just to be there, like with the nerd stuff to go on. But I think this worked out pretty much just as well, if not better than I could have hoped. So we'll definitely have to.
I genuinely appreciate you guys for having me and enter your world, which is great, and it's fun. And I've watched the episodes and they're great.
Good. I'm glad. Yeah, so we'll figure this out. We'll make this happen again, because I think it's super cool. But for everybody watching, for everybody listening, thank you so much for joining us on a like I said, a different kind of episode. But for me, it was awesome. I had a blast. And next week we've got more Last of Us. We've got a little Picard we'll talk about. I know there's some is next week in the 4th.
Bear. I saw Cocaine
Bear. Oh yes,
today.
you've got to talk about Cocaine Bear. I don't think I'll see it before then, but I'm super stoked to know what you thought about it.
My buddy wrote, I no longer need to go to the movies ever again in my life because I just watched the greatest film in cinema history.
That is awesome.
I walked out smiling.
That's awesome.
And not to go off, I just listened to this guy called Mr. Ballin, who basically is a guy on YouTube that tells true crime stories. He told a couple months ago, or maybe a year ago or whatever, he put the true story of the Cocaine Bear and all the actual part of the drug dealers and how they jumped out of a plane, all this stuff. It was fascinating. So I loved how they market this, where we're like, so this happened and this is this true story if this bear did this.
It's awesome. Yeah. Cool. So I was super stoked for that. So with that, thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and we will catch you all next week.